The November rain hammered against the windows of Stella's diner like bullets nobody bothered to dodge. Inside, the fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting their sickly yellow glow across cracked vinyl booths and checkered linoleum floors that had seen better decades. The smell of burnt coffee and grease hung thick in the air, the kind of atmosphere where dreams came to die quietly, one shift at a time. Maya Rivera moved through the space like a ghost, 26 years old, thin as a whisper, with dark hair always pulled back so tight it looked painful. Her uniform, a faded pink dress with a white apron, hung loose on her frame. She'd mastered the art of invisibility, of taking up no space, of never making eye contact long enough to register as human. "Table 7 needs a refill," barked Eddie, the day manager, without looking up from his racing form. "And don't forget the ketchup bottles. They look like shit." "Yes, sir," Maya murmured, already moving toward the coffee pot. It was Tuesday, 3:15 in the afternoon, the dead zone between lunch and dinner, when only the regulars remained. Old men nursing cups of coffee they'd stretch for hours, construction workers on break, the occasional lost soul seeking shelter from the rain. Maya preferred it this way. Quiet, predictable, safe. She'd been working at Stella's for 2 years, and in that time she'd perfected her routine. Arrive at 6, smile politely, take orders, deliver food, collect tips. Go home. Repeat. The other waitresses had given up trying to befriend her. Even Carla, who'd been working there since the Carter administration, had stopped asking questions after 6 months of one-word answers. Maya filled coffee cups, replaced ketchup bottles, cleared table 3 where someone had left exactly a $1.17 tip on a $12 check. She pocketed the coins without expression and wiped down the surface with mechanical efficiency. The bell above the door chimed. Maya didn't look up. Table assignments rotated. This one belonged to Stephanie, the blonde with the acrylic nails who somehow always got the good tippers. But Stephanie's voice cut through the diner with unusual sharpness. Eddie, we got a situation." The tone made Maya glance toward the entrance. 7 men stood just inside the doorway, rain dripping from expensive overcoats onto Stella's cheap floor. They weren't construction workers. They weren't regulars. They were something else entirely. The kind of men who made oxygen scarce just by existing. The one in front was different from the others. Vincenzo De Luca stood 6'2", broad-shouldered, with dark hair graying at the temples in a way that suggested distinction rather than age. His suit probably cost more than Maya made in 6 months. His shoes, Italian leather, polished to a mirror shine, clicked against the linoleum with the confidence of someone who'd never been told no. But it was his eyes that marked him as dangerous. Dark, assessing. The kind of eyes that calculated angles and advantages before most people finished saying hello. Every instinct Maya had developed over 2 years of hiding screamed at her to move toward the kitchen, to disappear into the back, to become even more invisible than usual. But her feet wouldn't cooperate. Eddie had gone completely pale. "Mr. De Luca," he stammered, practically tripping over himself to approach. "We weren't expecting, we don't usually—" "We need a table," Vincenzo said. His voice was smooth, cultured, but carried an edge that suggested questions were unwelcome. "Somewhere in the back." Of course. "Stephanie, clear the corner booth. Maya, get the good coffee going, not the regular shit." "The regular coffee is fine," Vincenzo interrupted, his gaze sweeping across the diner. His eyes passed over Maya without pausing. She might as well have been furniture. Good, she thought. Perfect. Please keep thinking that. Stephanie scrambled to wipe down the corner booth, the one with the torn vinyl seat that Eddie had been meaning to fix for 18 months. The men settled in like wolves claiming territory, their presence transforming the tired diner into something else, something darker. Maya retreated to the coffee station, her hands steady despite the adrenaline flooding her system. She'd learned long ago how to keep her hands from shaking, how to breathe through fear, how to function when every cell in her body wanted to run. "Those are De Luca's guys," Stephanie hissed, appearing beside her with wide eyes. "Do you know who Vincenzo De Luca is?" Maya shook her head. "Jesus, Mary, where have you been living? He runs half the city. Construction, shipping, probably half the politicians, too. People don't say no to him. People who try to say no to him end up—" She made a throat-cutting gesture. "You know, I don't know anything about it." Maya said quietly, measuring coffee grounds with precise movements. Well, Eddie's about to have a heart attack, so maybe try to act normal. Stephanie grabbed her order pad. I'm taking their table. That tip's going to be insane. She strutted toward the corner booth, her usual flirtatiousness amplified. Maya focused on the coffee, on the simple mechanical task of brewing it correctly. Don't think, don't react, don't exist. 15 minutes passed, then 30. The conversation from the corner booth was too low to hear, but occasionally laughter would erupt, the kind of laughter that felt like a threat wrapped in humor. Maya kept her distance, refilling other tables, checking the pie case, counting down the hours until her shift ended. Then Eddie's voice cut through her concentration. Maya! Maya, get over here. She turned. Eddie was gesturing frantically from near the corner booth. No, please, no. But she walked over anyway, her feet moving automatically, her face carefully blank. Vincenzo De Luca looked up as she approached. Up close, she could see the scar that cut through his left eyebrow, the slight asymmetry it created. His eyes were darker than she'd thought, nearly black in the diner's harsh lighting. Maya, Eddie said, his voice pitched too high, too eager. Mr. De Luca was just telling us about the chess set in his club, imported from Italy. Beautiful piece. He was wondering if anyone here plays. The man to Vincenzo's right, shorter, stockier, with a nose that had been broken multiple times, snorted. In this dump? Eddie, come on. These people probably can't spell chess. Eddie laughed. Too loud. Too desperate. Maya stood still, her hands clasped in front of her apron. Don't speak. Don't engage. Don't. What about you, sweetheart? The broken-nosed man leaned forward, grinning. You know what chess is? The horsey that goes sideways? The castle thingy? More laughter from the table. Leave her alone, Marco, Vincenzo said, though his tone suggested mild amusement rather than genuine reproach. He pulled something from his coat pocket. A small magnetic travel chess set, the kind sold in airport gift shops. Eddie was just telling me how quiet it is in here. Thought it might be entertaining to see if anyone wants to play. He wasn't looking at Maya. He was looking past her, through her, like everyone else did. I'll play, said Tony, another one of the men. But you always win, boss. Exactly. So it's boring. Vincenzo set the chess set on the table, the pieces clicking into place. I need someone who'll at least try to make it interesting. Good luck finding that in here, Marco said, still grinning at Maya like she was part of the joke. Something shifted in Maya's chest. A small thing, barely noticeable, like a door that had been locked for years suddenly remembering it had hinges. I'll play, she heard herself say. The table went quiet. Vincenzo's eyes finally focused on her, really focused, for the first time. His expression didn't change, but something in his posture sharpened. You play chess? Yes. Her voice was steady. She'd had years of practice keeping her voice steady. Marco laughed. This I gotta see. Boss, you're about to destroy this poor girl. Should we set a timer? I'm betting 3 minutes before she's crying. 5, Tony countered. She looks like she might actually know the difference between a bishop and a pawn. Gentlemen, Vincenzo said softly, and the table fell silent again. He gestured to the seat across from him. Please, sit. Maya sat. The vinyl seat was cold through her thin uniform. Up close, she could smell his cologne, something expensive and subtle that probably had an Italian name she wouldn't recognize. His hands were large, well manicured, with a signet ring on his right pinky that caught the light. He turned the board so she had white. Ladies first. It was meant to be patronizing. She knew that. They all knew that. Maya moved her king's pawn forward 2 spaces. E4. Vincenzo responded immediately. E5, mirroring her move. You know the rules at least. Impressive. She moved her knight, NF3. He countered NC6. Around them, the diner had gone completely silent. Even the usual kitchen sounds seemed muted. Eddie stood frozen by the coffee station. Stephanie had stopped pretending to wipe down tables. Maya developed her pieces with quiet efficiency. Bishop out. Castle kingside. No wasted moves. No hesitation. Across from her, Vincenzo's casual amusement was beginning to shift into something else. Concentration. His responses came slower, more deliberate. You've played before, he said. It wasn't a question anymore. She didn't answer. She captured his knight with her bishop, simultaneously opening a line for her rook. Marco leaned forward. Boss, she just took your... I can see what she took. Vincenzo studied the board. 30 seconds passed. A minute. He moved his queen to safety. Maya brought her other rook to the center file. The position was shifting. What had started as a standard Italian game opening had transformed into something sharper. Her pieces coordinated with mathematical precision, each move building pressure like water rising behind a dam. Vincenzo's jaw tightened. He was no longer treating this as entertainment. His moves became more aggressive, probing for weaknesses that weren't there. She met every thrust with perfect defense, then pivoted to attack. Her pieces danced across the board, not with flourish or showmanship, but with the cold efficiency of someone who'd spent 10,000 hours studying patterns, variations, endgames. 20 minutes had passed. Then 30. Nobody at the table was laughing anymore. Marco's grin had faded. Tony sat forward, actually watching the game now. The other men exchanged glances that ranged from confused to unsettled. Vincenzo was losing. Not quickly, not obviously, but the position was deteriorating. His king was beginning to look exposed. His pieces were tied down to defense. Maya's control of the center had become absolute. She moved her queen to d5 and Vincenzo actually flinched, just slightly, just enough that she noticed. Check, she said softly. He moved his king, the only legal move available. She repositioned her rook. He defended. She brought her bishop into the attack. The position was collapsing, not in 5 moves, but inevitably. The way a building collapses when the foundation has been removed, slowly at first, then all at once. Vincenzo stared at the board for 2 full minutes. His fingers drummed once against the table, the first sign of genuine agitation. Then he reached out and tipped over his king. Resigned, he said quietly. The diner remained silent. Maya sat back. Her hands were completely steady. Her face showed nothing. Inside, adrenaline was screaming through her veins, but decades of practice kept it invisible. Marco broke the silence. What the hell just happened? She beat me, Vincenzo said. His eyes hadn't left Maya's face. Thoroughly. Must be luck, Tony said. Nobody beats you at chess, boss. It wasn't luck. Vincenzo reset the pieces. Again. Maya hesitated. Every survival instinct she'd developed was telling her to decline, to make excuses, to retreat back into invisibility. Men like this didn't like losing, especially not to waitresses, especially not in front of their people. But that door in her chest, the one that had been locked so long, had opened a crack. And the thing that had been trapped behind it for years was breathing again. Okay, she said. The second game lasted 18 minutes. Maya played a different opening, the Sicilian defense. Vincenzo adapted, his play more cautious, more respectful of her ability, but the result was the same. Checkmate. The third game was even shorter. Marco had stopped trying to make jokes. The other men watched in complete silence, like they were witnessing something they didn't have the vocabulary to describe. Vincenzo studied the board after the third loss, his expression unreadable. Then he looked up at Maya, really looked at her, for the first time since walking into the diner. Who are you? He asked. Nobody, Maya said. Just a waitress. That's a lie. He said it without anger, just certainty. Waitresses don't play chess like that. Nobody plays chess like that unless they've dedicated their life to it. He leaned back. So I'll ask again. Who are you? Maya stood. The movement was smooth, practiced, the same way she'd been standing and sitting and moving for 2 years without making ripples. I should get back to work. Eddie needs... Sit down. It wasn't a request. Vincenzo's voice hadn't risen, but somehow the temperature in the diner dropped 10 degrees. Maya sat. What's your full name? She hesitated. Maya Rivera. Where did you learn to play? I've played since I was a child. That's not an answer. He was studying her now the way he'd studied the chessboard, looking for patterns, weaknesses, angles. You don't play like someone who learned from a book. You play like someone who's been coached, trained. You play like... He stopped. How old are you? 26. Something clicked behind his eyes. Rivera. Maya Rivera. He pulled out his phone, typed something, scrolled, stopped. Christ. He turned the phone to show her the screen. It was an old article from 12 years ago. A black and white photo of a 14-year-old girl standing beside a chess trophy almost as tall as she was. The headline read, American prodigy Rivera wins junior championship, eyes grandmaster title. Maya felt her chest tighten. That was a long time ago. You were ranked 7th in the world, Vincenzo said, reading from the article. Youngest female player to ever defeat a sitting grandmaster. They called you the future of American chess. He looked up. What happened? I quit. People like you don't quit. Not when you're that good. Not when you're on track to become a grandmaster. His eyes narrowed. Someone made you quit. Maya stood again. This time she didn't wait for permission. I need to get back to work. She turned to leave, but Vincenzo's voice stopped her. I'll be back tomorrow, he said. Same time. And we're going to play again. I don't think that wasn't a request, Miss Rivera. Their eyes met. For 3 seconds, neither blinked. Then Maya nodded once and walked away, her footsteps steady, her breathing controlled, her hands not shaking until she reached the kitchen and closed the door behind her. Behind her, she heard Marco's voice. Boss, what the hell was that? And Vincenzo's response, quiet but clear. That, Marco, was the most interesting thing to happen to me in 20 years. The rest of Maya's shift passed in a blur. Eddie kept shooting her nervous glances but didn't ask questions. Stephanie cornered her by the ice machine. What did you do? She hissed. I played chess. You don't just play chess with Vincenzo De Luca. People who mess with him end up... Another throat-cutting gesture. I didn't mess with him. I just played. Well, you better hope he found it entertaining, because if he didn't... Stephanie shook her head. Girl, I don't know whether to be impressed or start planning your funeral. Maya finished her shift at 11. She changed out of her uniform in the cramped bathroom, pulling on jeans and a sweatshirt that had seen better years. Her apartment was 6 blocks away, close enough to walk, even in the rain. The November night was cold and wet. The streets were mostly empty, just the occasional taxi splashing through puddles. Maya walked fast, hands jammed in her pockets, head down. She'd spent 2 years making herself invisible, 2 years erasing every trace of who she'd been, 2 years building walls so high and thick that nothing could get through. And in 30 minutes, Vincenzo De Luca had found the one crack in her armor. Her apartment was a studio on the 4th floor of a building that should have been condemned a decade ago. One room. A bathroom with a shower that only worked if you kicked the pipe. A kitchenette with 2 burners and a mini fridge. Rent was $800 a month, which was the only reason she could afford it. Maya locked the door behind her, deadbolt, chain, doorknob, and only then allowed herself to breathe. The chess set sat on her tiny table. Not expensive, not magnetic, just a basic wooden set she'd found at a yard sale 3 months after arriving in New York. She'd promised herself she wouldn't play, that touching the pieces would be like touching a live wire connected to everything she'd run from. But sometimes, late at night when the nightmares were bad, she'd sit at the table and move the pieces anyway, just to prove she still could, just to remember that there had been a time when she was more than invisible. She made tea, cheap chamomile from the bodega, and sat by the window looking out at the rain-slicked street below. I'll be back tomorrow. She should quit, should pack her few belongings, catch a bus to somewhere else. Start over again. It was what she'd done before, what she'd gotten good at. But the thought of running made her tired in a way that had nothing to do with her 12-hour shift. Maya closed her eyes and saw the chessboard. Saw the way Vincenzo's expression had shifted from amusement to concentration to something like respect. Saw the moment he'd realized she wasn't just good. She was better. For 2 years, she'd been nobody. Nothing. A ghost serving coffee to people who looked through her. For 30 minutes, she'd been Maya Rivera again, and it had felt like breathing after being underwater too long. Set. Wednesday afternoon, 3:15, Vincenzo De Luca walked through the door of Stella's diner with the same 7 men as before. Same suits, same expensive shoes, same presence that made oxygen scarce. Maya was wiping down table 4. She'd known he'd come, had spent the entire morning telling herself she should call in sick, should avoid this, should run. But she'd shown up for her shift anyway. Vincenzo's eyes found her immediately. He gave a small nod, acknowledgement, not greeting, and headed for the same corner booth. Eddie practically ran over. "Mr. DeLuca, welcome back. Can I get you some coffee? And tell Maya she has a game to play." Maya set down her cleaning rag and walked to the corner booth on legs that felt steadier than they had any right to be. She slid into the seat across from Vincenzo without being asked. He'd brought a real chess set this time, wood and weighted pieces, a proper board. He set it between them with the care of someone handling something valuable. "You came," he said. "You told me to." "I did." He smiled slightly. "But I didn't think you would." "Why?" "Because people usually don't do what I tell them if they're smart enough to have a choice." He gestured to the board. "You're clearly smart enough." Maya said nothing. She moved her pawn to e4. They played for an hour. Vincenzo lost the first game but made her work for it. Lost the second game in a brilliant tactical sequence that left Marco swearing under his breath. The third game was still in progress when Eddie nervously approached to say they needed to close the kitchen for cleaning. "We'll finish tomorrow," Vincenzo said, standing. He left $200 bills on the table. "For the coffee." The coffee had cost $4. "I can't accept that," Maya said. "It's not for you. It's for Eddie, for letting us use his space." Vincenzo buttoned his coat. "Though, if you want to be compensated for your time, I'm happy to arrange something." "I don't want money." "Then what do you want?" The question caught her off guard. She'd spent so long not wanting anything, not allowing herself to want anything, that she'd forgotten what desire felt like. "I don't know," she admitted. Vincenzo studied her for a long moment. "Yes, you do. You're just afraid to say it." He headed for the door, his men falling into formation around him. "Tomorrow, same time." He came back Thursday, Friday, Saturday. Every day, 3:15, like clockwork. Every day they played for hours. Every day, Maya won more games than she lost, and Vincenzo's play got sharper, more aggressive, more desperate to find her weaknesses. The other waitresses watched with a mixture of fascination and horror. Stephanie started taking pictures when she thought Maya wasn't looking. Eddie developed a nervous tic. But Vincenzo seemed happy. That was the strange part. He lost gracefully, won with satisfaction, and always insisted on one more game, even when his men were clearly getting restless. On the 8th day, Marco couldn't take it anymore. "Boss," he said, after Maya had just delivered a devastating checkmate, "can I talk to you outside?" Vincenzo glanced at Maya. "Reset the board. I'll be right back." Maya watched through the window as Marco gestured emphatically, clearly arguing about something. Vincenzo listened, arms crossed, expression neutral. Then he said something brief, and Marco went pale and nodded rapidly. Vincenzo came back inside and sat down like nothing had happened. "Your move," he said. Maya moved her knight. What did Marco want? To understand why I'm spending my time playing chess with a waitress instead of handling business. What did you tell him? That it's none of his business. Vincenzo captured her bishop, and that the next person who questions how I spend my time will find themselves out of a job. Permanently. They played in silence for several moves. "Why do you keep coming back?" Maya asked finally. "Because I keep losing." He said it simply, like it was obvious. "I don't lose. At anything. And I need to understand why I'm losing to you. Maybe you're just not as good at chess as you thought." He laughed, a genuine sound that made his men look over in surprise. "Maybe. Or maybe you're better than you've let yourself believe." His expression sobered. "I did some research. After that first day." Maya's hands stilled on the board. Maya Rivera, born in Los Angeles, started playing chess at age 6. By 12, you were beating adults in tournaments. By 14, you were ranked 7th in the world for your age group. Every grandmaster in America wanted to coach you. You were headed for the very top. He paused. Then, at 16, you vanished, dropped out of competitive chess completely. No explanation, no goodbye, just gone. That was a long time ago. 10 years. Most people would have forgotten. But I found an interview with your old coach, Maurice Chen. He said losing you was like watching someone choose to go blind, that you had the kind of talent that appears maybe once in a generation. Vincenzo leaned forward. So I'll ask again, what happened? Maya looked at the chessboard, at the pieces arranged in their careful dance, at the space where possibility and reality met. I met someone, she said quietly, at a tournament. He was older, charming, told me I was special, told me he could help me become even better. She moved her rook, not looking up. Turned out he just wanted to control me. The chess was threatening to him, made me too independent, too confident. So he started breaking that down, piece by piece. Vincenzo's jaw tightened. He hurt you. Not at first. At first it was just subtle things. Comments about how chess was making me selfish, how I was neglecting our relationship. Then it got worse. If I won a tournament, he'd find a reason to be angry. If I practiced, he'd accuse me of loving chess more than him. She finally looked up. Eventually, it was easier to just stop playing, to make myself smaller, to give up the thing that made me dangerous. Where is he now? Something in Vincenzo's voice made Maya's skin prickle. It was the same tone he'd used with Marco, quiet, controlled, but with violence coiled underneath. I don't know, she said. I left him 3 years ago, disappeared, changed my name. Rivera was my mother's maiden name. I haven't seen him since. His name. It doesn't matter. It matters to me. Maya shook her head. I didn't tell you this so you'd do something about it. I told you because you asked why I quit. That's why. I let someone convince me I was only worth something if I made myself nothing. They sat in silence for a long moment. Then Vincenzo reached across the board and moved his king into checkmate, deliberately, intentionally. I resign, he said. Not because you beat me, because you deserve to win. Maya felt something crack in her chest. That's not how chess works. No, but it's how respect works. He stood. Tomorrow, same time. And Maya, thank you for trusting me with your story. I won't forget it. He left with his men, and Maya sat alone at the corner booth, staring at the chessboard where Vincenzo De Luca had just done something she'd never seen anyone do. He'd chosen to lose, to prove a point. And for the first time in 3 years, Maya Rivera allowed herself to cry. The crying didn't last long. Maya had learned years ago how to compartmentalize emotion, to feel it, acknowledge it, then lock it away before it could interfere with survival. She wiped her eyes with a napkin, reset the chess pieces with steady hands, and finished her shift like nothing had happened. But something had changed. She could feel it in the way she moved through the diner, in the way she met customers' eyes instead of looking past them. The door in her chest had opened wider, and the thing that had been trapped inside was stretching, testing its boundaries. That night, she pulled out her old chess books. They'd been packed in a cardboard box under her bed for 3 years, wrapped in a garbage bag, to protect them from the apartment's persistent dampness. Openings theory. Endgame studies. Annotated games from world championships. The pages were worn soft from years of study, margins filled with her teenage handwriting analyzing variations, questioning master-level decisions, finding improvements that shouldn't have been possible for a 14-year-old to see. Maya sat cross-legged on her bed and opened a book at random. A game between Kasparov and Karpov from 1985. She'd studied this game 100 times when she was 15, had memorized every move, every deviation, every moment where the balance shifted. Her fingers moved across the board, replaying the game from memory. The positions flowed like music she'd forgotten she knew. Her mind calculated variations, 3, 4, 5 moves deep without conscious effort, the same way a pianist's fingers remembered sonatas even after years away from the keys. She played until 3 in the morning, until her eyes burned and her tea had gone cold, and for the first time in years she fell asleep without nightmares. The next day was Sunday. The diner was busier, families after church, brunchers, the weekend crowd that tipped better but demanded more. Maya worked her section with newfound efficiency, her mind clear and sharp in a way it hadn't been in years. 3:15 came and went. Vincenzo didn't show. Maya told herself it was fine, that he'd gotten bored, that whatever curiosity had driven him to return day after day had been satisfied. She cleared tables, refilled coffee, smiled at customers who still didn't really see her, but part of her, The part that had been waking up felt the absence like a missing tooth her tongue kept finding. At 4 o'clock, the door chimed. Vincenzo walked in, alone. No men, no entourage. Just him in dark jeans and a charcoal sweater that probably cost more than her monthly rent, but looked almost casual, almost normal. He spotted her immediately and headed for the corner booth. Maya approached with her order pad, playing the role. Coffee? Please. And whatever pie Eddie's pretending is homemade today. Apple. It's actually from a box. Even better. He waited until she'd poured his coffee before speaking again. I sent the guys home. Thought maybe we could play without an audience for once. Maya glanced around. The diner was still half full, but nobody was paying attention to the corner booth. They didn't like that you kept losing to a waitress. They didn't like a lot of things, but they work for me, not the other way around. He pulled out the chess set, the same wooden one he'd been bringing. Your move. We never finished yesterday's game. Maya sat. She'd been white, 2 pawns up, with a winning endgame. But instead of playing from that position, Vincenzo reset the board completely. New game, he said. Fresh start. They played for 2 hours. The diner emptied around them. Eddie locked the front door at 6, but didn't ask them to leave. Maya won the first game. Vincenzo took the second. The third ended in a draw after a complicated endgame that had them both calculating silently for 20 minutes. You're getting better, Maya said, resetting the pieces. I'm learning from the best. Vincenzo leaned back, studying her. Can I ask you something? You're going to anyway. He smiled slightly. Why waitressing? With your mind, you could do anything. Accounting, finance, programming, anything that pays actual money. Those jobs require references, background checks, conversations where people ask questions. Maya moved her king's pawn. Waitressing, you show up, you work, you get paid cash. Nobody cares who you are or where you came from. You've been hiding, yes, for 3 years. Yes. That's a long time to be invisible. Vincenzo countered her move. Doesn't it get exhausting? Maya captured his pawn. More exhausting than running an empire built on fear? Touché. He developed his knight. Though I'd argue my empire is built on respect. Respect that comes from people being afraid of what you'll do if they don't respect you. Is there a difference? Yes, Maya said firmly. Real respect comes from admiration, not fear. People respect you because they're afraid. That's just control with better branding. Vincenzo was quiet for a moment, studying the board. You're not afraid of me. No. Why not? Maya moved her bishop into position. Because you chose to lose. That last game, when I told you about him. You deliberately put yourself in checkmate to make a point. Men who rule by fear don't do that. They don't make themselves vulnerable, even symbolically. Maybe I was just tired of losing and wanted to control how it happened. Maybe. Maya met his eyes. Or maybe you understood that sometimes the only way to show someone they matter is to give up power voluntarily. The corner booth felt suddenly smaller. Vincenzo's gaze held hers for 3 heartbeats, and Maya saw something shift in his expression. Surprise, maybe, or recognition. Check, she said quietly, moving her queen. He blinked, looked down at the board, and laughed. How do you do that? Do what? Dismantle me verbally and on the board simultaneously. Multitasking. Maya allowed herself a small smile. You should try it. They played until Eddie started pointedly cleaning around them. Vincenzo packed up the chess set and left another $200 on the table. At the door, he paused. Maya, next Sunday, if you're free, there's a chess club in Manhattan, Upper West Side. I own the building. Master-level players meet every week. He hesitated, which seemed unnatural for him. I thought you might enjoy playing someone other than me. Every instinct screamed at her to say no. Chess clubs meant exposure, meant people who might recognize her name, her face, her style of play, meant risking the invisibility she'd worked so hard to maintain. I'll think about it, she said. Vincenzo nodded and left without pushing. Maya locked up the diner with Eddie, who'd been watching their entire interaction with barely concealed anxiety. You know what you're doing? He asked as they walked out together. No. That's what I thought. Eddie pulled his coat tighter against the November wind. Just be careful, kid. Men like DeLuca, they don't do anything without a reason. And when they take an interest in someone, it's usually because that person has something they want. He wants to beat me at chess. Maybe. Eddie didn't sound convinced. Or maybe he wants something else. And the chess is just how he's getting close enough to figure out what it is. Maya thought about that as she walked home through streets that had started to feel less threatening, less like a maze designed to trap her. Maybe Eddie was right. Maybe Vincenzo had ulterior motives. Maybe she was being stupid to trust someone whose power came from violence and intimidation. But for the first time in 3 years, she was playing chess again. For the first time in 3 years, someone looked at her and saw Maya Rivera instead of a ghost in a pink uniform, and that felt worth the risk. The week passed in a strange rhythm. Maya worked her shifts, studied chess in the evenings, and found herself thinking about Vincenzo's invitation more than she wanted to admit. Sunday arrived cold and bright, the kind of November day that promised winter was coming but hadn't quite arrived. Maya stood outside the address Vincenzo had written on a napkin, a brownstone on West 72nd Street that looked like it cost more than most people earned in a lifetime. The brass plaque beside the door read, Manhattan Chess Society, in elegant script. She'd changed into her best clothes, dark jeans without holes, a sweater that was only slightly pilled, boots that didn't leak. She'd pulled her hair back but left it looser than usual, not pulled tight enough to hurt. Small rebellions. The door opened before she could knock. Vincenzo stood in the doorway wearing slacks and a button-down shirt, sleeves rolled to his elbows. Behind him, Maya could hear the murmur of conversation, the click of chess pieces on wood. "You came," he said, and his smile was genuine. "I wasn't sure you would." "I wasn't sure either." He stepped aside. "Come in. Meet the others." The building's interior was beautiful. Hardwood floors, crown molding, walls lined with framed photographs of famous chess matches. The main room held a dozen tables, each with a chess set, most occupied by players deep in concentration. The age range varied from college students to retirees, but they all shared the same focused intensity Maya recognized from her tournament days. An older man with white hair and sharp eyes looked up from a game and waved. "Vincenzo, about time. We were beginning to think you'd forgotten us." "Never, Richard." Vincenzo guided Maya forward with a hand on her shoulder, casual, proprietary, but somehow not threatening. "Everyone, this is Maya. She's the player I've been telling you about." Several people looked up with polite interest. One woman, maybe 40, with graying blonde hair, set down her piece and approached. "The one who's been beating you?" She extended her hand. "Catherine Morrison. I've been playing against Vincenzo for 8 years, and I think I've won maybe 10% of our games, so whoever can beat him regularly has my immediate respect." Maya shook her hand. "Maya Rivera." Catherine's expression didn't change, but something flickered in her eyes. Recognition? Maybe. But she didn't say anything, just smiled and gestured to an empty table. "Want to play? I promise I'm meaner than Vincenzo." They played for 3 hours. Catherine was good, really good. Former competitive player, she explained between moves, who'd quit the circuit to raise kids but never stopped loving the game. She played with aggressive precision, creating complications that forced Maya to calculate carefully. Maya won their first game after a hard fight. Catherine won the second. The third was still in progress when Richard announced they were ordering food. "We do this every week," Catherine explained. "Play until we're starving, order enough Chinese food to feed an army, keep playing until someone has to physically remove us from the building." "That someone is usually me," Vincenzo said, appearing with 2 cups of coffee. He set one in front of Maya. "Cream, no sugar, right?" She nodded, surprised he'd remembered from watching her make coffee at the diner. The food arrived, mountains of it, spread across a side table. The chess club transformed into something more casual, players gathering to eat and argue about games, positions, famous matches. Maya found herself pulled into a heated discussion about the Sicilian defense, with 3 people who all had different opinions about the Najdorf variation. "You're the Rivera," one of them, a college kid named James, said suddenly. "The junior champion. I read about you in a chess history book. You beat Grandmaster Chen when you were 14. The room went quiet. Maya felt the old panic rising, the urge to deny, to deflect, to disappear. But Vincenzo was watching her with those dark, assessing eyes, and she remembered the way he deliberately lost to prove a point about respect. "That was a long time ago," she said. "But you did it." James leaned forward, excited. "The book said you were going to be one of the greatest players America ever produced. What happened? Why'd you quit?" "James," Catherine said sharply. "Personal questions are rude." "It's okay." Maya took a breath. "I quit because I needed to. Sometimes life happens, and you have to make choices between what you love and what you need to survive." Richard nodded slowly. Many players face that decision. The game demands everything, and not everyone can give it. "But you're playing again now," James said. "Does that mean you're coming back? Are you going to compete again?" "I don't know," Maya admitted. "I'm just playing, trying to remember why I loved it in the first place." "Then you're in the right place," Catherine said. "We all love it here. Win, lose, draw, doesn't matter. It's about the game." The conversation shifted to other topics. Maya finished her game with Catherine, another draw, and found herself playing against Richard, whose style was completely different. Slow, methodical, classical. Like playing against a chess computer from the 1980s. She was deep in calculation when she felt someone watching her. Not Vincenzo. He'd been pulled into a game with a teenager who seemed determined to prove himself. This was someone else. Maya glanced up and saw a man standing in the doorway. 30s, expensive suit, carefully styled hair. He was staring at her with an expression she couldn't quite read. Then he smiled and walked toward their table. "Incredible," he said. "Maya Rivera, in the flesh, after all these years." Maya's blood turned to ice. She knew that voice, had spent 3 years trying to forget it, 3 years running from it. "Daniel?" she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Daniel Chen, no relation to her old coach, despite the shared surname, stopped at their table. Up close, he looked older than she remembered, lines around his eyes, gray creeping into his temples. But the smile was the same, charming, possessive. "You look different," he said. "The hair, the clothes, almost didn't recognize you, but then I saw you play, and there's no mistaking that style." He pulled out a chair uninvited. "How have you been? Where have you been?" Richard looked between them, sensing tension. "Friend of yours?" "No," Maya said. "We used to be very close," Daniel said smoothly, ignoring her, before she disappeared without a word. 3 years I've been looking for you, Maya. 3 years wondering if you were dead or just ungrateful." Across the room, Vincenzo's head turned. He'd heard the tone change, the way conversations shift when violence is about to enter the room. "You need to leave," Maya said, standing. Her chair scraped against the hardwood. "I just got here." Daniel's smile didn't waver. "I was invited, actually, member's guest. I heard there was a chess club, thought I'd check it out. Imagine my surprise when I see my ex-girlfriend, the one who ran away, playing like nothing happened." "The one you destroyed, you mean?" The words came out before Maya could stop them. "The one you spent 2 years breaking down, piece by piece, until there was nothing left." Daniel's smile finally cracked. "That's a dramatic interpretation." "It's the truth. The truth is you were weak. Talented, yes, but weak. You couldn't handle the pressure of being great, so you needed someone to blame when you failed." Vincenzo was walking toward them now, moving with the careful precision of a predator approaching prey. "I never failed," Maya said, her voice steady despite the adrenaline flooding her system. "You made me quit because my success threatened you. Because you couldn't stand that I was better at something than you were." "Better?" Daniel laughed. "You were a performing monkey, a party trick. You memorized openings and patterns but never understood the deeper game." "Then why did I beat you?" Maya stepped closer. "Every single time we played, I won, and that's why you stopped playing me. Why you convinced me that winning was selfish, that chess was making me a bad person, that I needed to give it up to prove I loved you." "This is fascinating," Daniel said, standing. "But you're making a scene." "Good." Maya felt something break free inside her. Years of silence, of swallowing anger, of making herself small. "You should be ashamed. You should walk out of here and never come back. Because I'm not that scared 16-year-old anymore. And you have no power over me." Daniel's expression darkened. "You ungrateful little—" He didn't finish the sentence. Vincenzo's hand landed on his shoulder, not violently, but with enough pressure that Daniel stopped mid-word. When Vincenzo spoke, his voice was quiet, almost conversational. "I think the lady asked you to leave." Daniel tried to shake off Vincenzo's hand. Failed. "This doesn't concern you." "Actually, it does. This is my building, my chess club, and Maya is my guest." Vincenzo's grip tightened slightly, "which means you have about 10 seconds to walk out that door before I make you leave in a way you won't enjoy." "Do you know who I am?" "I don't care who you are." Vincenzo leaned closer, and his voice dropped to something cold and final. "But I know who you were to Maya. I know what you did. And the only reason you're still standing is because she deserves to watch you leave on your own, defeated, knowing that you failed to control her." The room had gone completely silent. Every player had stopped their games to watch. Daniel looked at Maya, then at Vincenzo, then at the room full of witnesses. His face flushed red. "This isn't over." "Yes, it is," Maya said. "It's been over for 3 years. You just didn't realize it." Daniel jerked away from Vincenzo's grip and walked toward the door. At the threshold, he turned back. "You'll regret this." "The only thing I regret," Maya said clearly, "is not leaving you sooner." He left. The door closed behind him with a decisive click. Maya stood in the center of the room, shaking but upright. Vincenzo was beside her, close enough to catch her if she fell but not touching her, giving her space. "You okay?" he asked quietly. "No." Maya's voice trembled. "But I will be." Catherine appeared with a glass of water. "That was incredibly brave." "That was incredibly stupid," Maya corrected. "He knows where I am now. He'll come back. He always comes back." "Not to this building," Vincenzo said. His voice carried absolute certainty. "And not to you. I'll make sure of it." "You can't promise that." "Watch me." Richard cleared his throat. "Perhaps we should call it a night. Give Maya some space." But Maya shook her head. She walked back to the table where her game with Richard sat unfinished. Her hands were shaking, but she moved her knight anyway. "Your move," she said. Richard hesitated, then sat down. The room watched for a moment. Then slowly, conversations resumed. Games continued. Someone made a joke about the Sicilian defense, and laughter broke the tension. Maya played chess with shaking hands until the position settled and her breathing evened out. She lost to Richard, her concentration shattered by adrenaline and memory, but she finished the game. When the club finally closed at 11, Vincenzo walked her outside. The November night was brutally cold, the kind that bit through clothing and found skin. "Thank you," Maya said, for what you did in there." "I didn't do anything. You're the one who stood up to him." Vincenzo pulled out his phone. "I'm calling you a car. I can take the subway." "Maya?" He looked at her seriously. "He knows where you are. He's angry and embarrassed. The subway at this hour, alone, is a bad idea." She wanted to argue, but he was right. "Okay, Masal." A black car arrived within minutes. Vincenzo opened the door for her, but before she got in, he handed her a business card. "My personal number," he said. "If he contacts you. If he shows up at your apartment or the diner. If you feel unsafe for any reason, call me immediately." Maya looked at the card. Simple. Expensive paper. Just a phone number, no name. "Why are you helping me?" "Because you're my friend." He said it simply, like it was obvious. And because that man in there was everything I despise. People who use power to make others small, who take talented, brilliant people and break them for the crime of being threatening. His jaw tightened. "I've spent my life building an empire on control. But there's a difference between control and cruelty. He crossed that line with you. And you never have." Vincenzo was quiet for a moment. "I've done things I'm not proud of. Hurt people who probably deserved better. But I've never tried to extinguish someone's light just because it outshone mine." He stepped back. "Get home safe. I'll see you Tuesday at the diner." Maya got in the car. As it pulled away from the curb, she looked back to see Vincenzo standing on the sidewalk, watching until she was out of sight. The driver was professional and silent, navigating through Manhattan traffic with practiced ease. Maya leaned her head against the window and watched the city blur past, lights and movement and millions of people living their lives in proximity, but not connection. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. Her stomach dropped. But when she opened the message, it wasn't from Daniel. Made sure the car will wait until you're inside your building. Front door locked, apartment secured, sleep well. V. Maya typed back. How did you get my number? Eddie gave it to me. Hope that's okay. Wanted to make sure you're safe. She should have been angry about the invasion of privacy. Should have felt violated that her boss had given out her personal information. But instead, she felt something else. Protected. The car pulled up outside her building. The driver waited while she went inside, then idled at the curb until she'd climbed the 4 flights and unlocked her apartment. Through the window, she watched the car pull away only after her lights came on. Maya locked her door, deadbolt chain doorknob, and sat on her bed. Her hands had stopped shaking. Her breathing was steady. But she felt fundamentally changed, like she'd been carrying something heavy for years and had finally set it down. Daniel had found her. The thing she'd feared most for 3 years had happened, and she'd survived it. More than survived, she'd confronted him, had named what he'd done, had refused to let him rewrite history or make her small again. Maya pulled out her phone and typed a message to the number Vincenzo had given her. Thank you for tonight, for everything. The response came immediately. You're welcome. Same time Tuesday? Same time Tuesday. She set down her phone and looked at her chess set, the cheap wooden one from the yard sale. Tomorrow she'd go back to the diner, back to serving coffee and taking orders and pretending to be invisible. But something fundamental had shifted. The door in her chest wasn't just cracked anymore. It was wide open, and Maya Rivera was done hiding. Tuesday came with freezing rain that turned the city sidewalks into skating rinks. Maya arrived at the diner an hour early, unable to sleep, unable to stay in her apartment where every shadow felt like Daniel lurking just out of sight. Eddie was already there, prepping the coffee station and looking surprised to see her. You okay, kid? He asked, studying her face. You look like you haven't slept. I'm fine. Maya tied her apron with practiced efficiency. Just couldn't sleep. DeLuca called me yesterday, asked if you'd shown up for your shift. Eddie poured himself coffee from the fresh pot. Told him you were tough, that you'd be here. Was I right to say that? Yes. Maya started filling salt shakers, needing something to do with her hands. Did he say anything else? Just that if anyone came around asking about you, anyone at all, I was to call him immediately. Eddie set down his mug. Maya, I don't know what's going on between you two, but be careful. Men like DeLuca, they don't form attachments without reason. We're friends. Friends. Eddie didn't sound convinced. You know what he does for a living, right? The things he's capable of? I know he's dangerous. I know he runs an empire built on violence and fear. Maya looked up from the salt shaker. I also know he's never made me feel small, never tried to control me, never punished me for being good at something. Eddie sighed. Just promise me you know what you're getting into. I don't, Maya admitted, but for the first time in 3 years, I'm actually living instead of just surviving. That has to count for something. The morning shift passed slowly. The rain kept most customers away, leaving Maya with too much time to think and not enough to do. She reorganized the condiment station twice, wiped down tables that were already clean, and watched the clock crawl toward 3:15. At 2:30, her phone buzzed. Unknown number again, but this time her stomach didn't drop. She knew who it was before opening the message. Running late. Be there by 3:30. Order me the apple pie. V. Maya typed back, the box kind or the slightly better box kind. Surprised me. She found herself smiling despite everything. At 3:15, she asked Eddie if she could take her break early. He waved her away, and she slipped into the back to change from her coffee-stained work shirt into the clean one she'd brought. Stupid, she thought, checking her reflection in the bathroom mirror. He's seen you covered in ketchup and sweat. Why does it matter? But it did matter. Everything mattered now in a way it hadn't before. Vincenzo arrived at 3:30 on the dot, alone again, carrying the chess set and something else, a large envelope tucked under his arm. He slid into the corner booth and waited until Maya brought his coffee before speaking. "How are you?" he asked. "Tired, jumpy, but okay. Any contact from him?" "No." Maya set down the pie, the slightly better box kind, heated with a scoop of ice cream that was definitely melting too fast. "You?" "Nothing direct." Vincenzo opened the envelope and pulled out several photographs. "But I had someone do some research. Thought you should know what we're dealing with." Maya looked at the photos. They showed Daniel entering and leaving various buildings, a high-rise office in Midtown, an expensive restaurant, a brownstone in the West Village. The timestamp spanned the last 2 days. "You're having him followed." "I'm gathering information." Vincenzo pushed another photo across the table. This one showed Daniel talking to 2 men in suits outside a parking garage. "He works in finance, hedge fund management, makes obscene amounts of money moving other people's money around, lives in a $2 million apartment, drives a Porsche." "I don't care about his money." "You should." Vincenzo tapped the photo. "Because men like him, they're used to buying their way out of problems, used to making things disappear with the right check or the right phone call." He pulled out another photo. "He's also got a history. You weren't the first." Maya's breath caught. "What?" "There was a woman before you, Allison Spencer. Dated him when she was 19, he was 24. She filed a restraining order 2 years later, citing emotional abuse and harassment. It was settled quietly. Her lawyer got her a payout and an NDA. How do you know all this?" "Because I have resources you don't." Vincenzo's expression was serious. "And because I wanted to make sure I understood exactly who we're dealing with. He's not just an ex-boyfriend who can't let go. He's a predator with a pattern." Maya stared at the photos, feeling sick. "There might be others." "Probably. Men like him don't just stop." Vincenzo gathered the photos back into the envelope. "I'm telling you this because I think he's going to try to contact you, either directly or through someone else. And I want you to be prepared." "What should I do if he does?" "Don't engage, don't respond, document everything and call me immediately." He pulled out another business card, identical to the one he'd given her before. "I had duplicates made. Keep one in your purse, one in your apartment, one in your locker here. Multiple redundancies." Maya took the cards. "You've thought of everything." "That's what I do. I think through scenarios and plan for contingencies." He finally smiled slightly. "It's how I've stayed alive this long in a business where most people don't make it to 40. "How old are you?" 43? Ancient by Mafia standards?" "You're not ancient. I'm old enough to know better and young enough to occasionally ignore what I know." Vincenzo opened the chess set. "Shall we?" They played for an hour, both distracted, both making uncharacteristic mistakes. Maya hung a bishop in the opening. Vincenzo missed a simple tactic that would have won him a rook. The game dragged into a complicated middle game where neither side had a clear advantage. "Your mind's not on the board," Vincenzo observed. "Neither is yours." "Fair point." He moved his queen, creating a threat Maya immediately parried. "Can I ask you something personal?" "You're going to anyway." He smiled at that. She'd used the same line on him weeks ago. "When you stood up to Daniel at the chess club, you looked different, not just brave, liberated. Like you'd been carrying something heavy and finally set it down." "I had been." "What was it?" "The weight, I mean." Maya studied the position, buying time to formulate an answer. "Shame," she said finally. "For 3 years, I've been ashamed. Ashamed that I let him control me. Ashamed that I gave up chess. Ashamed that I ran instead of fighting back." She moved her knight. "But when I saw him standing there trying to make me small again, something shifted. I realized the shame was never mine to carry. It was his. And I was done holding it for him." Vincenzo was quiet for a long moment. "That's the difference between you and most people." "What is?" "Most people would have run again. Would have disappeared the moment he showed up. But you stood your ground." He captured her knight with his bishop. "That takes a kind of courage I rarely see." "Or stupidity." "There's a fine line between courage and stupidity. The difference is usually whether you survive." He gestured to the board. "Your move." Maya studied the position. Vincenzo's bishop was now undefended, hanging on the same square where it had captured her knight. She could take it with her rook, winning material. But something about the position felt wrong, too easy, too obvious. She looked deeper. 3 moves ahead. 4. And there it was. The trap. If she took the bishop, he'd respond with queen to h5, threatening checkmate. She'd have to defend, and in defending, she'd lose her rook anyway. Net result, she'd be down material instead of up. "You're learning," she said, moving her king to safety instead. "I told you. I learned from the best." Vincenzo repositioned his bishop. The trap sprung without catching anything. "Though I'm disappointed you saw through it. You made it too obvious. The undefended piece, the casual way you offered it. If you really wanted to trick me, you'd have made me work for the opportunity. I'll remember that for next time." They played on. The position simplified, pieces trading off, until they reached an endgame that was technically drawn, but required precise play from both sides. Maya maneuvered her king into position, Vincenzo countered, and after 40 moves of careful calculation, they agreed to a draw. "First time we've drawn in weeks," Vincenzo noted, resetting the board. "Either I'm getting better, or you're distracted." "Both." Maya glanced at the clock. It was after 5, and the dinner rush was starting to trickle in. Eddie kept shooting pointed looks in their direction. "I should get back to work." "One more game, quick one." "Vincenzo, Ute, please." Something in his voice made her pause. "I know you need to work. I know Eddie's giving you the evil eye. But I've had a spectacularly shit day dealing with problems I can't solve by force or money. And sitting here playing chess with you is the only thing that's made me feel like a human being instead of a monster." Maya sat back down. They played speed chess, 5 minutes each, no increment. The game was wild, chaotic, full of sacrifices and tactical fireworks. Maya won with 3 seconds left on her clock, delivering checkmate with a queen and knight combination that had Vincenzo laughing even as his king fell. "Beautiful," he said. "Absolutely beautiful. How did you see that?" "I didn't. Not at first. But you pushed too hard on the king side, and I realized your king had no defenders." Maya stood, this time with finality. "I really do need to work now." "I know." Vincenzo packed up the chess set. "Same time Thursday?" "Same time Thursday." He left $200 on the table as always, and Maya watched him go before returning to her section. Stephanie materialized beside her within seconds. "Girl," she hissed, "you are playing with fire." "I'm playing chess." "You know what I mean. That man is dangerous, and the way he looks at you." "How does he look at me?" Stephanie paused, considering. "Like you're the only real thing in a world full of illusions. Like if he blinks, you might disappear." Maya thought about that as she served dinner to a family of 4, to a couple on a date, to a construction worker who left exact change and no tip. She thought about it as she closed out her register, as she changed out of her uniform, as she walked home through streets that felt less threatening now that she knew Vincenzo's people were watching. Thursday came and went. Then Sunday at the chess club, where Maya played 6 different opponents and won 5 games. Catherine pulled her aside at the end of the night. "You're getting your confidence back," the older woman observed. "I can see it in the way you play. Less hesitant, more aggressive. I'm remembering who I used to be." "Good," Catherine smiled. "Though I have to ask, what's going on with you and Vincenzo? We're friends." "Friends?" Catherine's tone was skeptical in a way that reminded Maya of Eddie. "Honey, I've known Vincenzo for 8 years. I've watched him play chess against dozens of people. He's never looked at any of them the way he looks at you." "How does he look at me?" Maya asked, echoing her question to Stephanie. "Like you're solving a puzzle he's been trying to crack his entire life." Catherine touched her shoulder gently. "Just be careful. Men in his position, they don't form attachments easily. But when they do, it's all-consuming. And I'd hate to see either of you get hurt." Maya walked home that night thinking about patterns, about the way Daniel had looked at her, possessive, controlling, like she was property to be managed, and the way Vincenzo looked at her, curious, respectful, like she was a mystery to be understood rather than solved. The difference was everything. Monday morning, Maya woke to 17 missed calls and 8 text messages, all from the same unknown number. Her hands shook as she opened the first message. "We need to talk. D. I know you're avoiding me. This is childish. Call me back. I'm sorry about the other night. I was surprised to see you. We should talk like adults. Maya, please. I just want to understand what happened. You can't ignore me forever. Fine. Be that way. But you'll regret this. I know where you work, where you live. You think hiding behind DeLuca will protect you? He's got bigger problems than playing bodyguard to his pet waitress. The last message had been sent at 2 in the morning. Maya sat on her bed staring at the words, feeling ice spread through her chest. She called Vincenzo's number. He answered on the first ring. What's wrong? No greeting, just immediate concern. Daniel's been texting me all night, the last one. He knows where I work, where I live, and he said something about you having bigger problems. Forward me the messages, all of them. His voice had gone cold, controlled. And stay in your apartment, don't go to work today. I can't just, Maya, firm but not harsh. Please, let me handle this. Stay home. Lock your doors. I'm sending someone to watch your building. Who? A friend. He'll text you when he's in position. His name is Tony. You met him at the diner. He's good people. Maya wanted to argue, wanted to insist she could handle this herself. But the messages had shaken her more than she wanted to admit. Okay. I'll call you later. And Maya? You did the right thing calling me. The line went dead. Maya forwarded the messages, then sat by her window watching the street below. 20 minutes later, her phone buzzed. In position across the street, black sedan. If you need anything, I'm here. Tony. She looked out and spotted the car. Tony raised a hand in acknowledgement. Something in Maya's chest loosened slightly. The day dragged. Maya tried to read, to study chess, to do anything productive. But she kept returning to the window, kept checking her phone, kept waiting for something terrible to happen. At 2 in the afternoon, Vincenzo called. He won't be bothering you anymore. What did you do? I had a conversation with him. A very clear, very specific conversation about boundaries and consequences. Vincenzo's tone suggested the conversation hadn't been pleasant for Daniel. He's been made to understand that any further contact with you, direct or indirect, will result in outcomes he won't enjoy. That's not an answer. It's the answer you're getting. A pause. Maya, I need you to trust me on this. I handled it. He's gone. For now. Forever. The certainty in his voice was absolute. Men like Daniel, they're bullies. They target people they think are vulnerable, isolated. But when they realize their target has protection, real protection, they move on to easier prey. And I made it very clear that you're under my protection. Maya closed her eyes. I don't want to be someone's property to protect. You're not property, you're... He stopped, started again. You're someone I care about, someone I respect, and I won't let anyone hurt you the way he did. That's not about ownership, it's about basic human decency. What did you tell him? That if he contacts you again, if he comes near you, if he so much as thinks about you too loudly, I will make it my personal mission to destroy everything he's built, his career, his reputation, his bank accounts, everything. A beat of silence. And then I showed him exactly how I'd do it, step by step, name by name, dollar by dollar. Maya should have been horrified, should have been scared of the kind of power Vincenzo wielded, the casual way he could threaten someone's entire existence. But instead she felt something else. Safe. Thank you, she said quietly. You're welcome. Now, are you okay to go to work tomorrow? Yes. Tony will keep an eye on things for the next few days, just as a precaution. He paused. And Maya? I'm sorry this happened, sorry that my invitation to the chess club put you in Daniel's path. You didn't know he'd be there. No, but I still feel responsible. His voice softened. Same time tomorrow? At the diner? Same time tomorrow. Tuesday, Maya returned to work with the strange sensation of being watched, not malevolently, but protectively. She spotted Tony's car across the street when she arrived, saw it still there when she left. The weight of surveillance should have felt oppressive. Instead, it felt like breathing room. Vincenzo arrived at 3:15 with the chess set and a small gift bag. What's this? Maya asked, suspicious. Open it. Inside was a book, a beautiful leather-bound analysis of games by Mikhail Tal, the legendary attacking player known as the Magician from Riga. The pages were gilt-edged, the binding pristine. It looked expensive and old. Vincenzo, I can't accept. It's just a book. It's a first edition from 1976. Is it? He looked genuinely surprised, though she suspected he was lying. Well, I can't return it now. And I certainly can't read Russian, so unless you want it to collect dust on my shelf, you should probably keep it. Maya opened the cover. On the first page, in elegant handwriting, was an inscription, "For Maya, may you always play with the courage of Tal and the precision of yourself. V." "Thank you," she said, her voice catching slightly. This is beautiful." "You're welcome." Vincenzo set up the chess pieces. "Now, let's see if reading about Tal's attacking style makes you even more dangerous." They played for hours. Maya tried some of Tal's wild, sacrificial ideas, offering pieces for unclear compensation, creating chaos on the board. Some attempts failed spectacularly. Others succeeded brilliantly, leaving Vincenzo shaking his head in admiration. "You're insane," he said, after she sacrificed her queen for a checkmate 5 moves later. "Completely insane." Tal was insane. "I'm just studying his work." "The student has surpassed the teacher." "Not even close." Maya reset the board. "But I'm getting better at seeing what's possible instead of just what's safe." Vincenzo leaned back, studying her. "That's not just about chess anymore, is it?" "No." Maya met his eyes. 3 years I played it safe. Hid. Made myself invisible. Convinced myself that being nothing was better than being hurt. She touched one of the queens, the white one, the one she'd just sacrificed for victory. "But you can't win by playing safe. Not in chess. Not in life. Sometimes you have to risk everything on an unclear combination and trust that the math works out. And if it doesn't, then at least you tried. At least you played the game instead of resigning before it started." Vincenzo was quiet for a long moment. Around them, the diner hummed with its usual late-afternoon energy. Eddie was arguing with a supplier on the phone. Stephanie was flirting with a regular for better tips. The coffee machine hissed and gurgled. "I need to tell you something," Vincenzo said finally. "About my world. About what I do." Maya waited. "You know I run an organization, that I have power and influence built on things that aren't exactly legal." He wasn't looking at her now, his gaze fixed on the chess pieces. "What you don't know is how much of that power is maintained through violence, through fear, through making examples of people who cross me." I assumed. Assuming and knowing are different things. He finally looked up. "I've hurt people, Maya. Destroyed lives. Made families grieve. And most of the time I've justified it by telling myself it was necessary. That it was just business. That in my world, mercy is weakness." "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I don't want you to have illusions about who I am, about what I'm capable of." His voice was steady, but there was something beneath it. Vulnerability, maybe, or shame. "When I threatened Daniel, I meant every word. I would have destroyed him completely if he'd refused to back off, and I wouldn't have lost sleep over it." Maya considered this. "Did he back off?" "Yes." "Then you didn't have to destroy him. You gave him a choice." That doesn't make the threat any less real." "No. But it makes it different than what Daniel did to me." Maya leaned forward. "Daniel hurt me because my success threatened him, because he needed me to be small to feel big. You threatened Daniel because he was actively harming someone under your protection. The violence might look similar from the outside, but the motivation is completely different. You're rationalizing. I'm distinguishing." She moved upon. "I'm not naive, Vincenzo. I know you're dangerous. I know the power you wield comes from terrible things. But I also know that in the 3 weeks I've known you, you've never once made me feel afraid. You've never tried to control me or diminish me. You've only ever tried to help me become myself again. Because you're different." "Different how?" "Because you see the world in patterns and possibilities. Because you're brilliant and kind and brave in ways that make me want to be better." He said it simply, like he was stating an obvious fact. "Because when I'm with you, I remember that there are things in life worth protecting instead of just controlling." The air between them felt electric. Maya's hand trembled slightly as she moved her bishop. "Your move," she said. They finished the game in silence. Maya won, but barely. Vincenzo packed up the chess set and left his usual tip. At the door, he turned back. Thursday? He asked. Thursday. He left, and Maya sat alone in the corner booth, holding the book of Tal's games like it was something precious. Which it was. Not because of its monetary value, but because of what it represented. Someone saw her, really saw her, and thought she deserved beautiful things. That night, Maya couldn't sleep. She lay in bed thinking about Vincenzo's confession, about the weight of violence he carried, about the choice she was making by continuing to see him. Every rational part of her brain screamed that this was dangerous, that getting close to someone like him was asking for trouble. But her heart, the part of her that had been dead for 3 years, was finally beating again. Her phone buzzed, a message from Vincenzo. Can't sleep, playing through our games in my head. You hanging that bishop in the opening still bothers me. Such an uncharacteristic mistake. Maya smiled and typed back, I was distracted. Someone had just given me a very expensive book, and I was trying to figure out what it meant. It meant I saw something beautiful and thought you should have it. Nothing more complicated than that. Everything with you is more complicated than that. A pause. Then, fair. But sometimes the complicated things are worth it. Sleep well, Maya. You too. She set down her phone and finally drifted off. The book of Tal's games on her nightstand, and for the first time in years, her dreams were about chess instead of running. The next 3 weeks fell into a rhythm that felt almost normal. Maya worked her shifts at the diner, played chess with Vincenzo every Tuesday and Thursday afternoon, and spent Sundays at the chess club where she'd become something of a fixture. Catherine had started calling her the prodigy who came back from the dead, which made Maya uncomfortable but also strangely proud. Daniel had vanished completely. No calls, no texts, no mysterious appearances. Tony's surveillance had ended after the first week, Vincenzo explaining that his people had confirmed Daniel had left New York entirely, transferred to his company's London office, apparently eager to put an ocean between himself and whatever consequences Vincenzo had promised. Maya should have felt relieved. She did feel relieved, but she also felt something else stirring beneath the surface, a restlessness that had nothing to do with Daniel, and everything to do with the way Vincenzo looked at her across the chessboard, the way his hand would accidentally brush hers when they were resetting pieces, the way he'd started staying later, ordering dinner, talking about things that had nothing to do with chess. It was a Thursday in mid-December when everything shifted. Maya was wiping down tables when Vincenzo arrived, but instead of heading to the corner booth, he walked straight to where she was working. His expression was serious in a way that made her stomach drop. "We need to talk," he said quietly. "Somewhere private." Eddie's office was barely larger than a closet, packed with filing cabinets and boxes of receipts that probably should have been digitized a decade ago. Maya closed the door behind them, and Vincenzo turned to face her, his hands shoved in his pockets. "There's a problem," he said. "A big one. And I need you to understand what's happening before it gets worse." "What kind of problem?" "The kind that involves the FBI, a federal investigation, and the fact that someone very high up in my organization has been talking to people they shouldn't be talking to." He ran a hand through his hair, the first truly agitated gesture she'd ever seen from him. "They're building a case. RICO charges, racketeering, money laundering, the whole arsenal, and they're close to having enough to move." Maya's mouth went dry. "How close?" "Weeks, maybe days." He looked at her steadily. "Which means you need to distance yourself from me. Immediately. Stop coming to the chess club. Stop our games here. If they're watching me, and they probably are, then being seen with me makes you a potential witness, or worse, an accessory. I haven't done anything illegal. That won't matter if they decide you're useful leverage. They'll subpoena you, question you, dig into your life looking for anything they can use." His jaw tightened, "And I won't let that happen. So we need to stop seeing each other, at least until this is resolved." Maya felt something crack in her chest. "You're ending this, just like that. I'm protecting you. By pushing me away? By making sure you don't get caught in the crossfire of a war that has nothing to do with you." Vincenzo took a step closer. "Maya, listen to me. These people don't play fair. They'll use anyone and anything to get what they want. Your past, your connection to me, the fact that you're vulnerable, all of that makes you a target. So your solution is to abandon me? My solution is to keep you safe." His voice rose slightly, frustration bleeding through. Do you understand what's at stake here? If this investigation goes the way I think it will, I'm looking at 20 years minimum. Everything I've built, everything I control, it all disappears, and anyone connected to me disappears with it. Then let me help. Vincenzo actually laughed, but there was no humor in it. Help how? You're a waitress who plays chess. What exactly do you think you can do against federal prosecutors with unlimited resources? The word stung more than he probably intended. Maya stepped back, her expression going cold. You're right. I'm just a waitress. Just a nobody who happened to be useful for entertainment when you were bored. Forget I offered. She turned to leave, but Vincenzo caught her wrist. Not hard, not controlling, just desperate. That's not what I meant. Then what did you mean? I meant... He stopped, struggling with words in a way she'd never seen before. I meant that you're the one good thing in my life right now. The one person who looks at me and sees something other than a criminal, or a weapon, or a means to an end. And I can't stand the thought of this world touching you, tainting you, destroying you the way it destroys everything else. Maya looked down at his hand on her wrist. You don't get to decide what destroys me. I've survived worse than FBI investigations. Have you? His voice was quiet now. Have you survived having your entire life picked apart by lawyers? Having your bank records, your phone calls, your relationships examined under a microscope? Having everything you've ever said or done twisted into evidence? No. But I've survived having my soul dismantled by someone who claimed to love me. I've survived 3 years of being invisible. I've survived running from shadows and living in fear. Oh, she met his eyes. So don't you dare tell me I'm not strong enough to handle whatever's coming. They stood there in the cramped office, so close Maya could feel the heat radiating from him, could see the war happening behind his eyes. I don't want to lose you, he said finally. Then don't push me away. It's not that simple. It never is. Maya pulled her wrist free gently. But here's what I know. You've spent weeks helping me remember who I am, helping me find my strength again. And now you want me to prove that strength by running away the moment things get difficult? That's not fair. No. What's not fair is you making decisions about my life without asking me what I want. She crossed her arms. So let me be very clear. I'm not going anywhere. If there's an investigation, if they question me, I'll deal with it. But I won't abandon you just because things are scary. Vincenzo stared at her for a long moment. Then something in his expression shifted. Resignation, maybe, or relief. You're sure? I'm sure. Even knowing what it might cost you? Even knowing, Maya moved toward the door. Now, are we playing chess today, or did you come here just to have a dramatic breakup conversation? Despite everything, Vincenzo smiled. We're playing chess. They returned to the corner booth and Eddie shot them curious looks but didn't ask questions. Vincenzo set up the board with hands that were steadier than they'd been in the office, and they played a game that felt charged with unspoken things. Tell me about the investigation, Maya said as she developed her knight. What are they actually looking for? Evidence that I run a criminal enterprise, which I do, so that part's not complicated. Vincenzo moved his bishop. The complicated part is proving it in a way that survives legal scrutiny. They need witnesses, documents, recorded conversations, which means someone in my organization has been cooperating. Do you know who? I have suspicions. But suspicions aren't enough. He captured her pawn. The problem is that once these investigations start, they create paranoia. Everyone becomes a suspect. Trust evaporates. And an organization built on loyalty can't function without trust. Maya studied the board, but her mind was working on a different puzzle. How many people in your organization actually know the full picture? Know enough to give prosecutors what they need? 4. Maybe 5? Vincenzo looked up, interested. Why? Because if only 4 or 5 people have that information, and the FBI is building a case, that means at least one of those people is talking. She moved her rook, which limits your suspect pool significantly. I've already thought of that. Have you thought about why they're talking? Maya leaned forward. People don't usually cooperate with federal investigations out of civic duty. They do it because they're scared or angry or being blackmailed. So which is it? Vincenzo was quiet, his eyes fixed on her face instead of the board. I haven't thought about it that way. Then start. Maya gestured to the chess pieces. This is just another game. More complicated, higher stakes, but the same principles apply. Identify the pieces, understand their motivations, predict their moves, and counter before they can execute. You make it sound simple. It's not simple, but it's logical. She captured his bishop. In chess, every move reveals information. Every decision tells you something about your opponent's strategy. The same is true here. The investigation exists. That's a fact. Someone is cooperating. That's a fact. Your job is to look at the board, identify the patterns, and figure out what move they're setting up. Vincenzo leaned back, a strange expression crossing his face. You're doing it again. Doing what? Making me see things differently, making the impossible feel solvable. He reset a piece she'd captured. My entire team has been running in circles trying to plug leaks and control damage. And you just reduce the entire problem to a chess position. Because that's what it is, a puzzle with limited variables and logical solutions. Maya moved her queen into an aggressive position. The question is whether you're willing to think about it strategically instead of reactively. What would you do if you were me? Maya considered this carefully. I'd stop trying to find the traitor through force or intimidation. That just makes everyone more paranoid and pushes the cooperating witness deeper into the FBI's protection. Instead, I'd feed different information to each of your 4 or 5 suspects. Unique details that only they would know. Then I'd wait and see which details show up in the investigation. Vincenzo stared at her. That's brilliant. That's basic information security. Chess players do it all the time when they're trying to figure out who's leaking their game preparation. She smiled slightly. The principle scales. And once I identify who's talking, that depends on why they're talking. If they're scared, you address the fear. If they're angry, you address the grievance. If they're being blackmailed, you remove the leverage. Maya met his eyes. The goal isn't punishment, it's resolution. You need them to stop cooperating, which means you need to give them a reason to stop that's more compelling than their reason to start. And if their reason is money, a deal with the prosecutors, then you make them a better deal. Or you make the prosecutors' deal worthless by removing the evidence they're trading for immunity. She moved her knight, threatening his king. Check. Vincenzo moved his king mechanically, his mind clearly elsewhere. You've thought about this before, about investigations and witnesses and evidence. I've thought about chess. The rest is just application. Maya pressed her attack. But yes, I've also thought about how systems work, how to identify weaknesses, how to exploit patterns. It's what my brain does. It's extraordinary what your brain does. They finished the game. Maya won, though Vincenzo put up better resistance than usual. As he packed up the chess set, he seemed to be wrestling with something. I want to bring you to a meeting, he said finally. What kind of meeting? The kind where I sit down with my 4 most trusted people and try to figure out which one is betraying me. He looked at her seriously. I think you'd see things we're missing. Patterns in how they talk, inconsistencies in their stories, things that wouldn't be obvious to people who are too close to the situation. Maya's first instinct was to refuse, to say this was too dangerous, too far outside her world. But then she thought about what she'd told him in Eddie's office, that she wouldn't run just because things got difficult. When? She asked. Tomorrow night, 8 o'clock. I'll send a car for you. Where? Somewhere private. Somewhere we won't be overheard. Vincenzo stood, leaving his usual tip. And Maya, thank you for not running, for seeing possibilities instead of just problems. That's what friends do. He smiled at that, but there was something in his eyes that suggested friends wasn't quite the right word anymore. Tomorrow night. Wear something you can move in, just in case. In case of what? In case things go badly and we need to leave quickly. He said it casually, like he was discussing the weather. I don't think they will, but I've stayed alive this long by planning for contingencies. After he left, Maya stood in the empty diner feeling the weight of what she'd agreed to. Stephanie appeared from the kitchen, eyes wide. Please tell me you're not getting involved in whatever he's involved in. I'm helping a friend. That friend is a mobster, Maya, an actual, literal criminal who runs an organization that hurts people. Stephanie grabbed her arm. I know he's been nice to you. I know he makes you feel safe, but that doesn't change what he is. I know what he is. Maya pulled her arm free gently. I also know what he's done for me, and I won't abandon him when he needs help. This is insane. You know that, right? This is absolutely insane. Probably, Maya grabbed her coat from the back. But I've been playing it safe for 3 years. I'm done with safe. That night, Maya couldn't sleep. She paced her tiny apartment, playing through scenarios in her head. A meeting with Vincenzo's inner circle. 4 or 5 people, one of whom was actively betraying him to the FBI. Her job was to observe, to analyze, to identify patterns that revealed the traitor. It was just chess, she told herself. Complicated chess with human pieces and real consequences, but chess nonetheless. She pulled out the book Vincenzo had given her, Tal's Games, and studied the magician's approach to impossible positions. Tal had been famous for creating chaos, for sacrificing material to generate complications his opponents couldn't calculate. His games didn't make objective sense. They shouldn't have worked. But they did work, because Tal understood something fundamental about chess and about people. Sometimes the illogical move was the right move, because it forced your opponent into unfamiliar territory where their expertise became a liability. Maya fell asleep with the book open on her chest and woke to her phone buzzing. A message from Vincenzo. Car will pick you up at 7:30. Address is 2847 West Street, Warehouse District. Come alone. V. She typed back. Alone. Got it. Anything else I should know? Trust your instincts, and if I tell you to run, you run. No arguments. You're being dramatic. I'm being realistic. These are dangerous men, Maya, even the ones who haven't betrayed me. She spent the day working her shift in a fog of anticipation and anxiety. Eddie noticed, of course, and pulled her aside during the lunch rush. Whatever you're doing tonight, be careful. How do you know I'm doing anything? Because you've got the same look my daughter had before her first deployment, like you're preparing for war but trying to convince yourself it's just routine. Eddie's expression was serious. DeLuca's a good tipper, and he's been decent to you, but don't confuse decent with safe. I won't. Promise me something. If things go sideways, if you get scared, if you feel threatened, you call me. I don't care what time it is. You call, and I'll come get you. Maya felt unexpected emotion well up. Thank you, Eddie. Don't thank me. Just stay alive. At 7:30, a black car pulled up outside her building. The driver was someone she didn't recognize, older, professional, with the kind of awareness that suggested military training. He opened the door without speaking, and Maya got in. The drive took 20 minutes through increasingly industrial areas of the city. The warehouse district was exactly what it sounded like, blocks of abandoned buildings, empty lots, streets that probably looked sinister even in daylight. The car pulled up outside a nondescript warehouse with boarded windows and a single door illuminated by a bare bulb. Tony was waiting outside. Ms. Rivera, good to see you again. Is it safe? Safe as it gets in this business. He opened the door. Boss is inside, second floor, end of the hall. The warehouse interior was cleaner than the exterior suggested. Someone had renovated part of it. New floors, painted walls, functioning lights. Maya climbed the stairs, her footsteps echoing in the empty space, and found Vincenzo waiting at the end of the hall. You came, he said. You asked. He studied her. Jeans, dark sweater, boots with good traction. Clothes she could move in like he'd suggested. Are you ready? No, but I'm here anyway. Vincenzo opened the door to a large room that had been set up as a conference space. 4 men sat around a table, all of them turning to look as Maya entered. She recognized Marco and Tony from the diner. The other 2 were strangers, one in his 50s with silver hair and expensive suit, the other younger, maybe 30, with the build of someone who spent serious time in the gym. Gentlemen, Vincenzo said, closing the door behind them. This is Maya Rivera. She's here as my consultant. Marco frowned. The waitress. Boss, with all due respect, she's also a strategic analyst with a unique perspective on complex problems. Vincenzo's tone suggested the topic wasn't open for debate. Maya, let me introduce everyone. You know Marco and Tony. This is Frank Delgado, my financial advisor. And that's Ricky Santos, head of security. Maya nodded to each of them, trying to project confidence she didn't entirely feel. Frank was studying her with open skepticism. Ricky looked bored. Marco seemed annoyed. Only Tony appeared neutral. "Shall we begin?" Vincenzo gestured to an empty chair next to him. Maya sat, and he remained standing, pacing slightly. "We all know why we're here. There's a federal investigation. Someone's cooperating, and I need to know who." "With respect, boss," Frank said, "bringing in an outsider isn't exactly—" "I trust her." Vincenzo's voice was flat, "which is more than I can say with certainty about anyone else in this room." The temperature dropped 10 degrees. The four men shifted uncomfortably, and Maya understood what Vincenzo was doing. He was creating pressure, making them aware that trust was conditional, that their positions were vulnerable. It was a chess move, an aggressive one. "Now," Vincenzo continued, "I'm going to ask each of you some questions. Maya is going to observe. And at the end of this conversation, we're going to identify our problem and solve it, permanently." Maya watched as Vincenzo questioned them one by one. Where they were on specific dates, who they'd spoken to, what information they had access to. The questions seemed random, but she recognized the pattern. He was probing for inconsistencies, testing their stories against each other. Marco was defensive, answering with barely concealed hostility. Tony was calm and direct. Frank was overly detailed, providing more information than necessary. Ricky was dismissive, treating the whole thing like an inconvenience. An hour passed. Then 2. Maya said nothing, just watched and listened, looking for the tells that revealed truth from deception. And then she saw it. Frank's hands. Every time Vincenzo mentioned the FBI specifically, Frank's right hand would move toward his pocket, just slightly, just for a second, before he caught himself. It was unconscious, the kind of nervous tic people develop when they're carrying something they shouldn't be. "Vincenzo," Maya said quietly, the first time she'd spoken since they started. "Can I talk to you? Privately?" His eyes met hers and something passed between them. Understanding, trust. He nodded. 5-minute break, he announced. "Stay in the room." They stepped into the hallway and Maya kept her voice low. "Frank's phone. He's got something on it that's making him nervous. Every time you mention the FBI, his hand goes toward his pocket." "You're sure?" "I'm sure. It's a tell. Like when chess players touch pieces they're thinking about moving." She met his eyes. "Whatever's on that phone, he doesn't want you to see it." Vincenzo was quiet for a moment, his expression unreadable. Then he pulled out his own phone and typed something. Seconds later, Tony appeared in the hallway. "Boss?" "Frank's phone, I need it. Now." Tony nodded and disappeared back into the room. There was a sudden commotion. Frank's voice raised in protest, the sound of furniture scraping. Then Tony emerged with a phone in an evidence bag. Vincenzo unlocked it. Apparently he'd had the foresight to know his people's passwords, and scrolled through. His expression went from neutral to cold in seconds. "Text messages," he said quietly, "to a number registered to an FBI field agent. Dates, locations, names, everything they'd need to build their case." He looked up at Tony. "How long?" "Looks like 3 months, boss." Maya felt sick. 3 months of betrayal. 3 months of Frank feeding information to the people trying to destroy Vincenzo. "Why?" Vincenzo asked, more to himself than anyone else. "Frank's been with me for 15 years. Why would he—" He scrolled further and stopped. "Oh. What?" Maya asked. "Photos. Of Frank with a woman who isn't his wife. At a hotel. Very compromising photos." Vincenzo's jaw tightened. They were blackmailing him. Threatened to send these to his wife, ruin his marriage, destroy his reputation. So he gave them what they wanted. Maya felt her analytical mind kick into gear. Which means he's not the enemy. He's a victim. They exploited his weakness. He still betrayed me. Because he was scared. Because he saw no way out. Maya touched Vincenzo's arm. "You said the goal isn't punishment, it's resolution, so resolve it." Vincenzo looked at her for a long moment. Then he walked back into the conference room with Maya and Tony following. Frank sat pale and shaking, clearly aware he'd been caught. The other men looked confused. "Frank," Vincenzo said, his voice controlled. "I know about the affair. I know about the blackmail. I know about the FBI." Frank closed his eyes. "Boss, I can explain. You're going to do more than explain. You're going to fix this. Vincenzo set the phone on the table. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to call your FBI contact. You're going to tell them you made a mistake, that the information you provided was inaccurate, that you were confused. They won't believe. They will, because we're going to make them believe. Tony's people are going to create a paper trail showing you've been having memory issues, medical records, prescription medications, documented episodes of confusion. Vincenzo leaned forward. By the time we're done, your testimony will be worthless to them, and the case they've been building will collapse. Frank stared. You're not going to kill me? Why would I kill you? You're more useful alive and loyal than dead and martyred. Vincenzo's expression softened slightly. You should have come to me when they approached you. Should have told me about the blackmail. I would have handled it. I was ashamed. Shame is expensive in this business. It makes you vulnerable. Vincenzo stood. Your marriage is your business. But your loyalty is mine. From now on, if you have a problem, any problem, you bring it to me first. Understood? Yes, boss. Frank's voice was barely a whisper. Thank you. Don't thank me. Thank Maya. She's the one who figured it out and convinced me there was a better solution than the obvious one. All four men looked at her then, really looked at her, and Maya saw the moment their perception shifted. She wasn't just the waitress anymore. She was someone who'd saved Frank's life and potentially saved all of them from the fallout of a botched investigation. The meeting ended shortly after. Vincenzo gave specific instructions to each person, creating a coordinated strategy to undermine the FBI's case. Maya watched the transformation from chaos to order, from paranoia to purpose. As they filed out, Frank stopped in front of her. Thank you, Ms. Rivera. I won't forget this. When they were alone, Vincenzo turned to Maya. You saved his life tonight. You know that, right? If you hadn't convinced me to find another way, I would have... He stopped. Let's just say the resolution would have been permanent. I know. Maya met his eyes. But that's not who you want to be. Not anymore. How do you know what I want to be? Because I've been watching you for weeks, and I've seen the man you are when you're not trying to be what everyone expects. She moved closer. You're not just a criminal, Vincenzo. You're strategic, you're intelligent, and somewhere under all the violence and control, you actually care about people. Tonight proved it. He looked at her with an intensity that made her breath catch. You're changing me. Good. You changed me first. The warehouse felt very quiet suddenly, very private. Vincenzo reached out and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, his hand lingering against her cheek. This is probably a terrible idea, he said quietly. What is? This. Us. Whatever this is becoming. But he didn't step back. You deserve better than someone with my history, my future. Let me decide what I deserve. Maya's heart was pounding, but her voice stayed steady. I've spent 3 years letting other people tell me what I'm worth, what I should want, who I should be. I'm done with that. Then what do you want? Maya looked at him, this complicated, dangerous man who'd helped her remember who she was. I want to keep playing chess with you. I want to keep finding solutions that don't require violence. I want to see if we can build something that doesn't destroy either of us in the process. Vincenzo smiled, and it transformed his entire face. That's a lot to want. Then I guess we better start planning our strategy. He laughed and kissed her forehead, gentle, careful, like she was something precious. Come on, I'll take you home. The drive back to her apartment was quiet, but it felt different than the drive there, lighter somehow, like they'd crossed a threshold neither could walk back from. At her building, Vincenzo walked her to the door. Same time next Tuesday? He asked. Same time next Tuesday, Maya paused. And Vincenzo? We're going to fix this. The investigation, the betrayal, all of it. We're going to find a way through that doesn't destroy everything you've built. You sound very certain. I am certain, because we're going to approach it like chess, strategically, patiently, and we're going to win. He kissed her forehead again, then her cheek, then, finally, her lips. Brief but electric. A promise of something neither was quite ready to name. Good night, Maya. Good night. She watched him drive away, then climbed the 4 flights to her apartment, feeling like the world had shifted on its axis. Tomorrow she'd still be a waitress. still be invisible to most people. But tonight, she'd helped save a man's life, had prevented violence with logic, had proven that her mind was worth more than anyone, including herself, had believed in years. And maybe, just maybe, she'd started something with Vincenzo De Luca that could actually survive the chaos of his world. The door in her chest wasn't just open anymore. It was wide open and flooding with light. The plan to dismantle the FBI's case took 3 weeks to execute, and Maya was involved in every step. What had started as occasional chess games in a diner had transformed into something neither of them could have predicted, a partnership built on strategy, trust, and the growing certainty that they worked better together than apart. Vincenzo's apartment became their war room. It occupied the top floor of a building in Tribeca, all floor-to-ceiling windows and minimalist furniture that probably cost more than most people's cars. But what struck Maya wasn't the luxury. It was the chess sets. 7 of them, displayed throughout the space like sculptures, antique ivory pieces from Russia, a modernist set carved from obsidian and marble, a traveling set that had supposedly belonged to Bobby Fischer. "You have a problem," Maya said the first time she saw the collection. "I have several problems. You'll need to be more specific." Vincenzo was spreading documents across his dining table, financial records, transcripts of Frank's conversations with the FBI, timelines of the investigation. "You're obsessed with chess," says the woman who used to be ranked 7th in the world. He glanced up, smiling. "I think we've established that we both have the same problem. The difference is, you're better at solving it than I am." They worked through the night building a counter-strategy that was part legal maneuvering, part psychological warfare, and part pure chess theory applied to real-world problems. Maya identified the weak points in the FBI's case, testimony that relied too heavily on Frank's information, evidence chains that could be broken with the right documentation, witnesses whose credibility could be questioned. "They're overextended," she said, moving documents around like chess pieces. "They started this investigation assuming Frank would give them everything. But if Frank's testimony becomes unreliable, the whole structure collapses. It's like a chess position that depends on one critical piece. Remove that piece, and suddenly nothing works." Vincenzo watched her work with something that looked like reverence. "You're enjoying this." "I'm solving a puzzle. Of course I'm enjoying it." Maya looked up. "Though I'd enjoy it more if the consequences weren't so serious. The consequences are what make it meaningful." He moved beside her, studying the documents over her shoulder, close enough that she could feel the heat of him, smell the faint scent of his cologne. "Low-stakes puzzles are just entertainment. This is survival." The medical records were the first piece. Tony's people created a paper trail showing Frank had been experiencing memory issues for months, doctor's appointments, prescription medications for early-stage cognitive decline, documented episodes where he'd confused dates and details. It was elaborate, detailed, and completely fabricated. "This feels wrong," Maya said, reviewing the fake medical files. "We're lying to federal investigators. We're protecting someone who was blackmailed into cooperation." Vincenzo's voice was calm, rational. "The FBI exploited Frank's weakness. We're just making him an unreliable witness so they can't use him anymore." "That's still obstruction of justice." "Yes, it is." He looked at her seriously. "If that crosses a line for you, tell me now. I won't ask you to compromise your ethics." Maya thought about this. Thought about Frank's pale, terrified face when he'd been caught. Thought about how the FBI had weaponized his affair, his shame, his fear. Thought about the difference between justice and the law. "What happens to Frank after this?" she asked. "He stays with me, works off his debt through loyalty instead of information, gets a second chance to prove he can be trusted." Vincenzo paused. "And I help him fix his marriage, therapy, counseling, whatever it takes. Because a man whose home life is stable is a man who's less vulnerable to outside manipulation." You're going to pay for marriage counseling for someone who betrayed you?" "I'm going to invest in making sure it doesn't happen again." He said it like it was obvious. Prevention is cheaper than damage control. Maya smiled despite herself. "You really are learning." "I have a good teacher." The second piece of their strategy was more aggressive. Maya had studied the FBI's approach, looking for patterns in how they built cases. They relied heavily on financial evidence, bank records, wire transfers, anything that could prove money laundering or illegal transactions. But financial evidence was only meaningful if it could be connected to criminal activity. So we create legitimate business transactions that explain every questionable transfer, Maya said, sketching out a flowchart. Real estate purchases, consulting fees, investment returns, all legal, all documented, all providing alternate explanations for the money movements they're trying to use as evidence. Frank, who'd become Maya's unlikely ally in this process, stared at her diagrams. This is brilliant. It doesn't deny the transactions happened. It just reframes them as legal business. Exactly. They can't prove criminal intent if there's a reasonable legal explanation. Maya looked at Vincenzo. But this only works if your actual business operations can withstand scrutiny. If they dig deeper and find real criminal activity, we're just buying time. Then I need to clean house. Vincenzo's expression was serious. Anything that can't survive investigation needs to be shut down, permanently. You're talking about dismantling parts of your empire. I'm talking about choosing which parts are worth keeping. He met her eyes. You asked me once what I wanted to be. I think I'm figuring out the answer. Over the next 2 weeks, Vincenzo systematically shut down every operation that couldn't be legitimized. The gambling that happened in the back rooms of restaurants he owned closed. The loan sharking that generated reliable income ended. The protection rackets that had been running since his father's time dissolved. Marco was furious. Boss, you're cutting out 30% of our revenue. How are we supposed to operate? By operating legally. Vincenzo's voice left no room for argument. The world is changing. The old ways don't work anymore. Law enforcement has better technology, better resources, better cooperation across jurisdictions. If we want to survive, we need to evolve. Into what? Legitimate businessmen? Marco's tone was scathing. Yes. Vincenzo gestured to the documents Maya had prepared. Real estate, construction, shipping, hospitality, all industries we already operate in, just without the illegal sidelines. We keep the infrastructure, lose the criminal exposure. That's not who we are. Then maybe it's time to become someone different. Vincenzo looked around the room at his assembled crew. I'm not asking for a vote. I'm telling you how this is going to work. Anyone who can't adapt is free to leave, with my blessing and a generous severance. But if you stay, you follow the new rules. Nobody left. The third week brought unexpected complications. The FBI, realizing their case against Vincenzo was weakening, shifted tactics. They started looking at the people around him, searching for new pressure points. And they found one. Maya was leaving the diner after her evening shift when 2 agents approached. A man and a woman, both in dark suits, both with the kind of polite aggression that marked federal law enforcement. Maya Rivera? The woman asked, showing her badge. I'm Special Agent Chen. This is Special Agent Rodriguez. We'd like to ask you some questions about Vincenzo De Luca. Maya's heart rate spiked, but her voice stayed calm. I don't know anyone by that name. Really? Agent Chen smiled without warmth. Because our surveillance shows you've been meeting with him regularly for the past 2 months. The diner, his chess club, his residence. That's a lot of contact with someone you don't know. I know a customer who comes to the diner. I don't know his full name or what he does for a living. His name is Vincenzo De Luca. He runs a criminal organization responsible for racketeering, money laundering, and extortion. Agent Rodriguez stepped closer. And you've been seen entering and leaving his apartment at all hours, which makes you either very naive or complicit. Maya kept her expression neutral, but inside she was calculating. They were trying to rattle her, to make her defensive. It was an interrogation technique. Apply pressure, create fear, exploit the reaction. I play chess with someone who tips well and treats me with respect, she said. If he's involved in criminal activity, I have no knowledge of it. And unless you're charging me with something, I'd like to go home. We're not charging you, yet. Agent Chen handed her a business card. But we will be serving you with a subpoena. You'll testify before a grand jury about your relationship with De Luca. And lying to federal investigators is a felony, Ms. Rivera. So I'd suggest you start being more honest about what you know. They left, and Maya stood on the sidewalk feeling her carefully maintained composure crumble. She pulled out her phone with shaking hands and called Vincenzo. He answered immediately. What's wrong? FBI, 2 agents. They're going to subpoena me. Where are you? Outside the diner. Stay there. I'm sending Tony. He'll bring you to me. 20 minutes later, Maya was sitting in Vincenzo's apartment while he paced like a caged animal. Tony stood by the door and Frank was reviewing notes on his laptop. They're trying to use you as leverage, Vincenzo said, his voice tight with barely controlled anger. They know you're important to me. They'll put you in front of a grand jury, ask questions designed to make you either lie or implicate me. Either way, they win. What do I do? You tell the truth. He stopped pacing. You play chess with me. You visited my apartment. You've attended meetings. All of that is factual and not illegal. What you don't know, what you can honestly testify you don't know, is anything about my business operations. They'll ask about the warehouse meeting. And you'll say you were there as my friend, that you observed a business discussion you didn't understand, and that you have no knowledge of the specifics. Vincenzo knelt in front of her chair. Maya, listen to me. You haven't committed any crimes. You haven't participated in any illegal activities. The worst they can do is make you uncomfortable. They can charge me with obstruction if they think I'm lying. You won't be lying. You'll be telling your truth, that you know me as a friend and chess partner, not as a criminal. He took her hands. I won't let them destroy you because of me. Frank looked up from his laptop. There might be another option. Everyone turned to him. The investigation is falling apart, Frank said. My testimony is compromised. Their financial evidence has legitimate explanations. They're grasping at straws by going after Maya, which means they're desperate. He looked at Vincenzo. What if we gave them something else? Something that satisfied their need for a win without actually exposing you? What are you suggesting? A smaller fish. Someone in your organization who's been operating independently, who's committed crimes you can honestly say you didn't authorize. Frank's fingers flew across the keyboard. We give them a real criminal to prosecute. They get their conviction, and the heat comes off everyone else. Vincenzo was quiet for a long moment. You're talking about sacrificing someone. I'm talking about strategic amputation, cut off the diseased limb to save the body. Frank pulled up a file. Marcus Green. He's been running a drug distribution network out of your shipping operations. You told him to shut it down 6 months ago. He didn't. Instead, he went deeper, bringing in pills from overseas. It's a federal case waiting to happen. How do you know this? Because I handle your finances, and I've seen the discrepancies. Money moving in ways it shouldn't. Shipments that don't match inventory. Frank looked apologetic. I was going to bring it to you, but then the FBI contacted me, and everything else took priority. Maya watched Vincenzo's face as he processed this. You want to give them Marcus. I want to give them a legitimate criminal who's actually breaking laws. Someone whose conviction wouldn't be a miscarriage of justice. Frank met his eyes. Marcus knew the rules. He broke them anyway. That has consequences. And Maya? If we give them Marcus, they don't need Maya. They'll focus on building their case against him instead of trying to manufacture one against you. Frank closed his laptop. It's not perfect, but it's strategic. Vincenzo looked at Maya. What do you think? She was surprised he was asking her opinion about something this serious. Is Marcus actually guilty of what Frank says? If Frank says he's running drugs through my operations, then yes, he's guilty. Vincenzo's jaw tightened. I told him explicitly that drugs were off limits, that I wouldn't tolerate that business under my umbrella. He chose to ignore me. Then Frank's right. This isn't sacrifice, it's consequence. Maya stood. And it protects everyone else, including the people who've actually been trying to follow your new direction. It also means cooperating with federal investigators. No, it means anonymously providing them with information that leads them to evidence they can discover on their own. Maya's mind was already working through the logistics. You don't hand them Marcus on a platter. You create breadcrumbs that lead them to him naturally. Tips from concerned citizens, anonymous reports, things that wouldn't be traceable back to you. Frank nodded slowly. That could work. I know the evidence locations, warehouse records, shipment manifests, financial transfers. We point them in the right direction, they do the actual investigation, and Marcus gets arrested based on their independent police work. How long? Vincenzo asked. 2 weeks. Maybe 3. Enough time to document everything, create the anonymous trail, and let the FBI think they're brilliant for following the breadcrumbs. Frank was already making notes. Maya's subpoena will still come through, but by the time she testifies, the investigation's focus will have shifted to Marcus. They might not even call her. And if they do, she tells the truth, that she knows you personally, knows nothing about your business, and has never witnessed any criminal activity. Frank looked at Maya. Which is accurate, right? Completely accurate. Maya met Vincenzo's eyes. I know you as a person, not as a criminal enterprise. The plan went into motion the next day. Frank, with Tony's help, began creating an anonymous trail of evidence pointing to Marcus Green's drug operation. Tips called in from burner phones. Documents mysteriously arriving at FBI field offices. Financial records accidentally left where curious agents might find them. Maya continued her normal routine. Work at the diner, chess games with Vincenzo, Sunday sessions at the chess club. But everything felt different now, charged with the knowledge that they were in the end game. One wrong move, and everything would collapse. The subpoena arrived on a Thursday. Maya held the official document in her hands, reading the dry legal language that commanded her appearance before a grand jury. She was scared, but she was also ready. I won't let you face this alone, Vincenzo said when she showed him the subpoena. They were in the corner booth at the diner, the chess set between them untouched for once. You can't come with me to a grand jury. I can hire you the best lawyer in New York, someone who'll make sure they can't trap you or twist your words. I don't need a lawyer. I need to tell the truth. Maya folded the subpoena carefully. I know you as a friend and chess partner. That's my truth. And no lawyer can make that more or less true. You're not afraid? I'm terrified. She smiled slightly. But I've learned that being afraid doesn't mean you can't move forward. It just means you move forward scared. Who taught you that? A friend who's been teaching me that courage and stupidity are sometimes the same thing, and the difference is whether you survive. She finally moved a chess piece, her king's pawn, the same opening move from their very first game. Your move. They played, and for those 2 hours the investigation didn't exist. There was only the board, the pieces, the familiar rhythm of move and countermove. Maya won, but it was close. Vincenzo was getting better, his play sharper, more confident. He was learning to see multiple moves ahead, to plan combinations instead of reacting to threats. You're going to beat me soon, Maya said as she reset the pieces. I've been trying to beat you for 3 months. I know, but you're getting close. Another few weeks, and I think you'll take a game off me. She smiled. And that's when I'll know I've taught you everything I can. And then what? Then we find new games to play. Maya stood, needing to get back to work. Together. Vincenzo caught her hand. I love you. The words hung in the air between them. Maya froze, her heart suddenly racing. He'd never said it before. They'd kissed, had grown close, had built something that felt profound and real, but neither had named it. You don't have to say it back, Vincenzo said quickly. I just needed you to know, before the grand jury, before whatever comes next. I needed you to know that you changed my life, that you made me want to be better than what I was. Maya sat back down. I love you too, even though it's terrifying and probably stupid and definitely complicated. The best things usually are. They sat there in the diner, holding hands across a chessboard, while around them the ordinary world continued its ordinary business. And Maya thought about how strange life was. How 3 months ago she'd been invisible, and now she was in love with a man who'd helped her remember who she was. The FBI arrested Marcus Green on a Tuesday morning. 20 federal agents descended on 3 of Vincenzo's warehouses simultaneously, finding enough evidence of drug trafficking to charge Marcus with enough felonies to put him away for life. The news coverage was extensive. A major drug bust, millions of dollars in illegal pills, a criminal operation that had been running for years. Vincenzo watched the news coverage with an expression Maya couldn't quite read. I should feel something, he said. Guilt, maybe, for giving him up, or satisfaction that the plan worked. But I just feel empty. You feel like you betrayed him. He betrayed me first. That doesn't make your choice easier to live with. Maya stood beside him, watching the footage of Marcus being led away in handcuffs. But you chose this over letting innocent people get caught in the crossfire. That has to count for something. Does it? Or am I just better at rationalizing violence now? You prevented violence. There's a difference. She touched his arm. Marcus made his choices. He knew the rules and broke them anyway. What happened to him is consequence, not injustice. The grand jury hearing was scheduled for the following week, but 2 days before Maya was supposed to testify, her subpoena was withdrawn. The FBI's focus had shifted entirely to the Marcus Green case. They didn't need testimony about Vincenzo's personal life when they had a major drug trafficking conviction to pursue. Agent Chen called Maya personally to inform her. "You got lucky, Ms. Rivera. We found a bigger fish to fry. I'm glad I could help." "You didn't help. You were just irrelevant in the end." The agent's voice was cold. "But we'll be watching, and if DeLuca makes a mistake, we'll be there." The call ended, and Maya stood in her tiny apartment, feeling the weight of 3 months lift from her shoulders. It was over. The investigation, the threat, the constant fear that everything would collapse. She called Vincenzo. "The subpoena's been withdrawn." He arrived at her apartment 30 minutes later, and they stood in her cramped space holding each other like they'd survived something profound, which they had. "It's really over?" she asked. "The investigation is, but the work isn't." Vincenzo stepped back, his hands on her shoulders. "I meant what I said about changing, about evolving into something better, and I need your help to do it." "What kind of help?" "Strategic help. I'm dismantling the criminal aspects of my organization, but I still have businesses to run. Legitimate businesses that need someone who can see patterns, identify problems, plan for contingencies." He paused. "I want you to work for me, officially, as a strategic consultant." "Boo." Maya stared at him. "I'm a waitress who plays chess. You're a genius who sees solutions where other people see chaos. You saved Frank's life. You saved my organization. You saw through an FBI investigation to find the exact leverage point that would collapse their case." Vincenzo smiled. "You're wasted serving coffee, Maya. You should be running things." "I don't have a degree. I don't have credentials." "You have something better. You have a mind that works differently than anyone else's, and I'm offering you a chance to use it." He pulled out a folded document. "I had my lawyers draw this up. Employment contract, full salary, benefits, the works. You'd be a legitimate consultant helping me transition my operations into legal business ventures." Maya took the contract, her hand shaking slightly. The salary listed was more than she'd made in the last 5 years combined. "This is insane. This is strategic. I need you, and I think you need this too. A chance to use your skills for something meaningful instead of just surviving." She looked at him, at this complicated man who'd walked into a diner 3 months ago and changed everything. "If I do this, we do it right. No criminal activity, no gray areas, everything completely above board." "Agreed. And we set up a foundation, something that helps people who've been abused, who've lost themselves, who need a second chance." Maya's voice strengthened. "If we're going to rebuild your empire into something better, then part of that better has to include giving back." Vincenzo was quiet for a moment. Then he smiled, the full, genuine smile that transformed his entire face. "A foundation. Using money I made from crime to help people recover from trauma. That's either poetic justice or the world's most ironic redemption arc." "Maybe both. When do you want to start?" Maya looked around her tiny apartment, the place she'd hidden in for 3 years, the symbol of everything she'd run from. "I need to give Eddie 2 weeks' notice. He deserves that much." "Take 3 weeks, 4, however long you need." Vincenzo pulled her close. "I'm not going anywhere, and neither are you, not anymore." The next 2 months were a whirlwind of transformation. Maya gave her notice at the diner, and Eddie threw her a goodbye party where Stephanie cried and called her brave and stupid in equal measure. She moved into a better apartment, still modest, but without the perpetual dampness and the shower that required kicking. Her work with Vincenzo was exactly what she'd hoped it would be. She analyzed his business operations, identifying inefficiencies and opportunities. She helped negotiate the sale of properties that couldn't be legitimized. She created strategic plans for expansion into new markets, all legal, all documented, all designed to build something sustainable. The foundation launched in March with a quiet ceremony that none of the press knew about. The Rivera DeLuca Foundation for Second Chances, dedicated to helping survivors of abuse rebuild their lives. They funded therapy, job training, housing assistance, everything Maya had needed when she'd run from Daniel but had been too scared to ask for. Catherine from the chess club became the foundation's executive director. Frank handled the finances. Tony managed security. It was a strange team, but it worked. And through it all, Maya and Vincenzo continued their chess games. Sometimes at his apartment, sometimes at the chess club, occasionally back at Stella's diner where Eddie would shake his head and bring them terrible pie and excellent coffee. On a Sunday afternoon in April, they played their 100th game together. Maya knew because she'd been keeping count, documenting each match in a notebook like the serious players did. The score stood at Maya 73, Vincenzo 19, with 8 draws. "I'm getting better," Vincenzo said, moving his queen into an aggressive position. "You are, but you're still too aggressive in the middle game. You force positions instead of letting them develop naturally." Maya countered with a quiet knight move that shut down his attack. "You sound like a coach." "Maybe I am. Maybe that's what we've been doing this whole time, coaching each other into being better versions of ourselves." They played in comfortable silence for a while. Then Vincenzo said something that made Maya's heart stop. "Marry me." She looked up. "What?" "Marry me." He wasn't looking at the board anymore. He was looking at her with absolute certainty. "I know it's fast. I know we've only known each other for 6 months, but I've never been more sure of anything." "Vincenzo." "Let me finish." He reached across the board and took her hands. 6 months ago, I was a man who ruled through fear, who measured success by how much control I had over others, who'd forgotten that life was supposed to be about more than just power. His voice was steady, but his eyes were bright with emotion. "Then you walked into my life, this invisible woman who turned out to be extraordinary, and you showed me a different way to be. You taught me that intelligence beats violence, that strategy beats force, that the real power isn't in making people fear you, it's in making them want to follow you." Maya's eyes were burning. "I didn't do all that." "You did. You absolutely did." He smiled. "And I want to spend the rest of my life learning from you, playing chess with you, building something beautiful with you. So yes, I'm asking you to marry me, even though it's crazy and fast and we probably should wait, because I don't want to wait. I want to choose you, today, tomorrow, forever." Maya looked at him, this man who'd helped her remember she was more than invisible, who'd protected her without controlling her, who'd changed his entire life because she'd shown him another way was possible. "Yes," she said. "Yes, I'll marry you." He kissed her across the chessboard, scattering pieces everywhere. Around them, the chess club erupted in applause. Apparently, they'd had an audience the entire time. Catherine, Richard, James, all the regulars who'd watched their relationship develop over Sunday games. "About time," Catherine said, appearing with champagne she'd apparently been keeping ready for exactly this moment. "We've been taking bets on when he'd finally ask." "Who won?" Maya asked, laughing through tears. "Me." "I said April. Richard thought May. James, bless him, thought you'd have to propose to Vincenzo because he was too scared to ask." They celebrated until the chess club closed, then walked through Manhattan streets that felt full of possibility instead of danger. Maya thought about how much had changed in 6 months, how she'd gone from invisible to essential, how she'd remembered she was brilliant instead of broken, how she'd found love in the last place she'd expected. "Can I ask you something?" Vincenzo said as they walked hand in hand. "Always. That first day in the diner when I invited you to play chess, why did you say yes? You'd spent years being invisible. Why risk exposure for a stupid game?" Maya thought about this. "Because for 3 years I'd been playing it safe, and safe was killing me, just slowly. When you offered me that game, it was like you were offering me a chance to be myself again, even just for a few minutes. And I decided that was worth the risk. Best decision you ever made." "Second best." She squeezed his hand. "The best was saying yes just now." They were married in June in a small ceremony at the chess club. Catherine officiated. Apparently she was ordained from some internet ministry. Frank and Tony stood as Vincenzo's witnesses. Stephanie flew in from Florida where she'd moved with her new boyfriend. Eddie walked Maya down the aisle because she'd asked him to, and he'd cried when she did. The ceremony was short, sweet, and involved several chess metaphors that made the assembled guests laugh. When the officiant asked if anyone objected, Marco stood up. Everyone froze. Then Marco grinned. I object that it took them 6 months to figure out what the rest of us knew after 6 days. But I guess smart people are allowed to be slow about some things. He sat back down. Carry on. The reception was held in a restaurant Vincenzo owned, one of the legitimate businesses they'd been expanding. The food was excellent. The wine flowed freely. And at some point during the evening, someone set up a chessboard in the corner. Maya and Vincenzo played one game, surrounded by friends and family and all the people whose lives had been changed by their unlikely partnership. She won, but barely. Vincenzo was getting better every day. One day I'll beat you, he promised. I know, and I can't wait to see it. She reset the pieces. But until then, I'll enjoy watching you grow. We grow together. That's the deal. He kissed her forehead. Partners in crime. Partners in legitimate business ventures, she corrected. That too. They danced until midnight. They cut a cake that Catherine had insisted on making, which was lopsided but delicious. They listened to speeches from people who'd known Vincenzo in his old life and marveled at the transformation love had created. And when the evening ended, they went home to the apartment they now shared, the one filled with chess sets and books and all the evidence of a life being built together. Maya stood by the window, looking out at the Manhattan skyline, and thought about the journey that had brought her here. From invisible waitress to strategic consultant, from victim to survivor to something stronger than either, from alone to partnered with someone who saw all of her and loved all of her. What are you thinking? Vincenzo asked, wrapping his arms around her from behind. That I'm grateful for all of it, even the hard parts, because the hard parts led me here. To me? To myself. You were just the catalyst. She turned in his arms, though I'm fairly grateful for you too. They stood there in the quiet apartment, two people who'd found each other in the most unlikely circumstances and had built something real from the chaos. Outside, the city hummed with millions of other stories, other lives, other people searching for connection. But inside, Maya and Vincenzo had everything they needed. They had each other. They had purpose. They had a foundation helping people rebuild their lives. They had legitimate businesses growing stronger every quarter. And they had chess, always chess. The game that had brought them together and taught them both that the best victories weren't about dominance, but about partnership. One more game before bed? Vincenzo asked. Maya smiled. Always one more game. They played until 3 a.m, trading victories and defeats, pushing each other to be better, to see further, to think deeper. And somewhere around move 30 of their final game, Maya realized something profound. She'd won, not the chess game. That was still in progress. But she'd won the larger game, the one that had started when she fled Daniel and went into hiding. She'd won back herself. Her confidence, her brilliance, her right to exist as something more than invisible. And the man sitting across from her, studying the board with intense concentration, had helped her do it. Not by rescuing her, she'd never needed rescuing, but by seeing her, by believing she was worth seeing, by giving her space to remember who she'd always been. Checkmate, Vincenzo said suddenly. Maya looked at the board. He was right. She'd been so caught up in her thoughts that she'd missed the simple tactic he'd been setting up for 3 moves. You won, she said, delighted. I won. He looked almost surprised. I actually beat you. You actually beat me. Maya stood and walked around the board to kiss him. Took you long enough. Was worth the wait. He pulled her into his lap. Though I have to admit, I'm going to miss losing to you. Who says you won't keep losing? That was one game. I'm still ahead 73-20. Then I guess we'll have to keep playing for the next 50 years or so. Maya rested her head against his shoulder, feeling the steady beat of his heart. That sounds perfect. And it was perfect. Not because their lives were without problems. They had plenty of those. Not because everything was resolved. The world was complicated and messy and full of challenges. But because they faced everything together, as partners, as equals, as two people who'd learned that the real victory wasn't in defeating your opponent, but in finding someone who made you better at the game. Outside, dawn was breaking over Manhattan. The city was waking up, starting another day of millions of stories unfolding simultaneously. And in a Tribeca apartment filled with chess sets and books and love, Maya Rivera De Luca was starting the first day of the rest of her life.